Thanks, Dave. Despite being a little bit fancier and a little bit more facial hairy, you're still spot on with Alienware being the best place to go for your gear. And this just runs in the family. Nan Olson would tell you Alienware for your gear, and she is absolutely correct as well. You can get your hands on some Alienware gear at home using code AWSMITE09 and heading on over to smitegame.com/Alienware. Thanks again to Alienware for being with us here and powering us here in Season 9 of the SMITE Pro League. And thanks to Dave of the past for ushering us in here for our second set of the day here on this fine Sunday, nearly said Saturday, in SMITE Pro League action. My name is Dolson. Trelly Relly joins me yet again. We were desking together yesterday, right?
That is true. That's where we were.
It is just such a momentous experience that like my brain can't contain it sometimes, which is why I usually forget about it.
I always remember our time together, so don't you worry.
Using my logic, that's bad for me, though, so I'm slightly offended at what you've just said. That's right. We got a triple header Sunday for you here today. We had two matches on Friday, as always, 2 on Saturday. 1 played so far today, and 0 3-game sets so far. The Bolts and the Scarabs will, I guess on either side, hope that the trend continues and they'll grab the 2-0 for themselves, but could be a 3-gamer here. And then how about the game to end the weekend? Jade Dragons up against the Camelot Kings. Gotta be a 3-gamer somewhere in between these 4 squads that are going to be battling it out. And remember, World's so important here. Phase 3. Really, you're trying to avoid dropping into the bottom 2 of the standings by the end of the phase. Give yourself a top 6 seeding and a chance at the Phase 3 playoffs to auto-qualify into Worlds. So, for both the Bolts and the Scarabs, Trelly, after the way their phase has started, Bolts lost to the Titans, Scarabs lost to the Dragons on Friday and Saturday, respectively. Super important for both of these two teams to get the ball rolling, get a win in the win column here to start off their phase.
Yeah, starting off Phase 3, road to world status. You know,
0-2?
Yeah, you don't want to be starting off 0-2 because it's very important you stay in that upper echelon of the standings, as you mentioned. Right. So you got to imagine quick bounce back on the mind, short memory, all those buzzwords to make sure that, hey, we're not sitting on the loss too much. We learned a lot. We talked to Coach Slaney. We didn't. Mifflin did. Talked to Coach Slaney. He said, we're learning a lot from each loss. We keep getting new players as of this team, so we finally got our roster here. We're learning, and we're looking to improve.
That's right. So the Bolts in a position where they've got Baskin now in the solo lane. Haddix, of course, previous Bolt solo laner over with the Leviathans. And so for the Bolts, you could make the argument about getting team chemistry going. We'll talk about the Scarabs. You could make a very similar argument for that squad as well. Neither of these two teams the easiest teams to run into with a roster swap. The Bolts went up against the Titans earlier on this weekend. Titans looked really good in that matchup. Bolts had some bright spots, and I don't think Bolts fans panicking just yet after the 0-2 loss to the Titans earlier on this weekend. But when there are roster swaps, meta changes, a new look really, and new importance going into Phase 3, you got to lean on who has brought you success earlier on in the year. And I think Lasborough throughout Phase 1 and 2 of the year so far, Trelly, has had a standout performance for this Bolts team, something they're going to need a lot more of throughout Phase 3, into qualifiers, into Worlds, if the Bolts want to find success.
Yeah, no doubt. Lasborough has that carry potential in him every single set, no matter who they're up against.
What about the dog, though?
No, that's SOT. Lasborough has the carry potential.
Right.
And it's just every time I look, no matter who they're up against, I always think, okay, if Lasborough gets on X-God, he has that carry potential. At the moment, Daji is not something that he's going to get too often, but that is one of his standout performances. Whenever he's on that character, I think he looks to make these massive plays. And it's always from early, right? Like that's a 2-minute first blood there for the team. He loves to get active early. And when the team does get active early, of course they're looking solid. Whenever Lasborough's able to find those first bloods and then power through those lanes, in particular the ones that he gets ahead, the Bolts were looking so solid. That was their Phase 1, their Phase 2. Phase 3 now with Baskin. I mean, Baskin's been looking extremely good as well the one game we got to see him. So playing through solo lane, certainly something that I would like to see Lasborough try and do, try and facilitate Baskin on whatever character he does decide to play in that lane, whether it be, we saw the Thor and I believe the King Arthur.
King Arthur, yep.
Try and get that ahead, let Baskin do what he does best, and it's just mechanically sound. That's the gameplay that I'm expecting. Yeah,
Baskin looked aggressive in the first set back in the SPL. Lasborough, despite an 0-2 loss in that set, a couple really good performances up against the Titans. 8-4-3 in Game 1 on the Lancelot, also on Lancelot in Game 2 against the Titans earlier on this weekend. That one was a 6-4-7 performance from Lasborough. So it hasn't gone negative yet.
Yep.
It's put together some consistent performances for this team. I think you can also look elsewhere. with this Bolts team. Ven had some great moments in that Titan set. Had some moments he'd like a redo on, I think. Barracuda had some good moments, some moments he'd like a redo on.
Oh, yeah.
And that's just been the story for the Bolts. Really great stretch kind of in the middle of the year. Getting back to that consistency going to be important for this squad. Lots to look at here for the Olympus Bolts. Good news is we've got Gormizer standing by with them for the pregame interview.
That's right. I've got Lasbra sitting next to me. And Lasbra, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, a couple of things here. The first one on the list is Friday's sets, because distinctly because the player cams that you guys had after that last team fight where the Titans turned things around, you're all just laughing. And it felt kind of, well, I guess in character, but also out of character. What was going on in the comms then?
I think we're just very excited to end because it's kind of annoying game to play. They were like playing very defensive. They gave us fire giants, but we couldn't like get in a position where we could end. And then we ended up finding a pick on Fenner, and we were like 4v5. Let's just see if we can end it on the Titan. And we got a little bit too excited, and yeah, people just end up dying.
Yeah, sometimes things happen, right? And unfortunate for them. I do want to know, though, because you're going up against the Scarabs, a lot of new faces that have shown up on the Scarabs over, well, the last couple of years, but definitely the last couple of months. How are you feeling about them as like a new roster and your expectations for this set?
I think we're gonna win. I'm pretty confident playing into them. Like, I think they still have to find their footing in the league with like a roll swap on Jakor and Sam finding his footing on that team.
I'm excited. Now, this question, the last one, was not prepared by me. It's a question that Dave had specifically, which is, how do you pronounce your last name?
Oh, my last name, Helkia.
Helkia? Yeah. And so I guess like because I think we got one Danish word from specifically from Vin when he was going forward with it. What languages close by do you know any others, or do you just have English and Danish?
I know a little bit of German. We got that taught in school since, 5th grade or something?
Nice.
But I didn't really follow the classes that much, so I only know like very basic.
Just some very basic. Either way, multilingual, and we have the last name pronunciation. There you go, Dave. We're going to throw it back to the desk, and he can talk about that, but probably also the Scarabs.
Yeah, I'm not going to talk about that at all because I'm going to butcher it despite just being told how to pronounce his last name. Look, I think the Olympus Bolts, no surprise, they're in high spirits.
Right.
Kind of funny, and I actually think in character for that team, the answer we got from Laz, where it's like, look, we just wanted to be out of that game. It was super annoying. The way the Titans were playing was obnoxious. Mm-hmm. We just wanted to bail out. And I think that's an indicator of a team who realizes that was just not going their way.
Yeah.
It was an obnoxious play style to go up against. Did not seem too concerned.
Yeah, it was one of those plays where, you got EFG, it's 45 minutes into the game. If you just drop all of your abilities on the Titan, you end. So it's like, all right, guys, let's just go in. We'll get ready for game 3. And then you're just like, all you can do is laugh at that point when you just get like 4-man Typhoon, skewered, everything like that. So I'm glad that they're not hanging on the loss too much. And another thing we heard from last is that they're pretty confident going up against the Scarabs here, as you would expect from a team like this that's been together for such a long time, even with a new solo laner.
Well, the question was, how do you feel about the Scarabs as a team? And I think Laz said he thinks they're going to win, but I don't think exactly what he meant. I think Laz feeling confident in the Bolts' chances. And the Scarabs in a chemistry building phase yet again, adding in Yark as their support player. And I think despite, again, the 0-2 loss for the Solar Scarabs team, they were going up against, one of the best-looking squads from earlier on in the phase in the year so far. And so I think it was just a really tough draw for the Scarabs in their first matchup and the opponents they had to go up against. And so you're starting to look towards Sanford Soccer here as the Solar Scarabs potential in-game leader trail, and we're trying to learn who's going to step up, who's going to be the shot caller for this team. Sam has got the game knowledge. Now it's about getting the vocality together and helping the Scarabs out with some shot calls in-game.
Yeah, I think that is something that Sam does have to step up in a big way. We got to talk to Yark yesterday about the interview, and he said he is very confident in his ability to shot call, but I think the issue about, having your support as your only shot caller is how many times is Sam for soccer on the right side of the map?
Right.
How many times is he, ganking solo lane? It doesn't matter what Yark's saying if he's not there, right? So Sam does have to step up in a big way. Always been a superstar player for whatever team he's on, but, sort of quiet and reserved. But I think that Sam does know, like, hey, it's time to step up. We gotta play our best Smite here because it is Phase 3. It is Road to World time. There's no time to sit back, and I think should be able to adapt to that pretty well. And I do take a lot of what Slaney says. Whenever I listen to their interviews, I always listen to Slaney because I think he's very knowledgeable on how this team has to grow. He's never one to be, in denial. He's like, okay, this situation kind of sucks. We had our superstar jungler in Scream. He left. Now we have to rebuild, but we are confident. We know that we can just adapt, and as long as we're consistently just learning in scrims and taking in, being a sponge for information, we're going to be looking real good once we get that practice under our belt.
I'll stand by it. I said earlier on in the year when jungle swaps were happening and they lost Scream, brought in Sam, I'll stand by it. I think Slaney has had one of the hardest jobs as a head coach in the SPL over the last year and a half or so. The sheer amount and the sheer difference of a looking roster that the Scarabs is now versus when the team first formed last year. I mean, that is hard to build chemistry, to build shot calling. Certain players have certain mindsets on how to play the game. And so forming one big cohesive unit's not easy to do. And so I think Slaney does deserve a lot of props for bringing this team forward. And I think is feeling confident in their ability. And so this is a big one for the Solar Scarabs. Show us some growth. I think going up against the Jade Dragons, I look at that second game against the Dragons, Trelly, a bit unique of a composition for the Jade Dragons, remember?
Yep.
And still looked really convincing. They got Jazzberry jammed, I think is a nice calm way of putting it.
Everyone gets jammed.
Everybody's no one is safe from a Jazzberry jamming, that's for sure.
Until they're not undefeated anymore with the new roster, everyone's getting jammed. So
that's right.
That's all we can say.
And how about the matchup we get to cast later on? Kings versus the Jazzberry Jammers themselves, a Phase 2 SMITE Summer Masters rematch. We'll see if the Kings can bounce back from the 5-game jamming. Man, I made it through all of them except for the very last one. We got a great set to get through before we get there. That's the Scarabs up against the Bolts and into picks and pans for game number 1. We have already gone, and we will catch back up. Ymir, Daji, Kabrakan, all taken away by the Scarabs. We're on the flip side. Eset, Yamoja, Guan Yu. So, Sustain being taken away from the Solar Scarabs by the Olympus Bolts here. Burst healing, more Sustain-y healing. Bolts don't want to deal with it.
Yeah, anyone that's using Fabulous hoops at the moment, probably someone you don't really want to deal with. Guan Yu and Yamoja are going to be pretty easy bans no matter who you're up against. And then the Daji, solid in the meta, but again, you're up against Lasbra. You don't want to be giving that one up. Probably a smart call as well. So now the option is, I was going to say, do you want to get some pressure for Baronic in the mid lane? Turns out, you just want to grab that RDO. Notably, has been played in support and solo as of recent, but that does leave open Hades, which Final K in particular has been dominating with, but I think everyone's starting to realize how much pressure you can get from this Hades in that solo lane role.
Right.
Just super annoying to deal with, as well as the Pele. That's going to bring some early damage as well.
I think this is a 1-2 punch where Lasbra is not only taking this Pele potentially away from Sam. It's a pick that Sam has played in the past and Sam has looked really good on, but also something that we saw the Olympus Bolts beat the Solar Scarabs with during SMITE Summer Masters. In the last matchup these two teams played against one another, it was a 4-4-6 Pele performance from Lasbra in a win against the Solar Scarabs. Now, I think there is some value in what you're thinking, Trelly, with getting Baronic onto something comfortable in the mid lane. Baronic had a really nice-looking AMC game getting put together against the Jade Dragons in Game 2 yesterday. It was like 4-1-4 at one point. Ended that game, though, at 5-4-6, so there was a bit of a fall-off later on in that game. But my point being, if given comfort, if given a composition around him, I do think Baronic's in a spot where you can kind of run a game. The Morrigan gives you a lot of options as far as transformations go, but it'll end up being RDO Lancelot Morrigan for the Solar Scarabs. How do you feel about their top 3?
I mean, pre-nerf Lancelot the Morgan, I would have called this GG, but Lancelot did take some nerfs in the process. The Morgan's still gonna have decent transformations, as you highlighted. Pele also could be something that
you think Hades is a viable transformation?
It certainly could be, depending on the build itemization and if the Hades gets ahead or behind. When I'm at like level 5, I look at itemization. When I'm the Morgan, I look at who I want to transform into. If there's ever multiple options, I'm like, have you backed? Have you finished your item?
Right.
Do I get 15 extra power for turning into you versus you? Those are the sort of things I look to, and I imagine Baronic does the same. So if you just see like a full Bancrofts and or like a tier 1 mace, maybe Hades would be better than Pele in that spot. But it does look like a bunch of magic damage here coming from the Bolts. Not only that Hades, but the Freya going to be locked in very early on. Not something I expect that the Scarabs would have banned away, but maybe they just wanted to get that locked in, some extra damage, possibly a Hunter in the mid lane for Ven later on with this, but I guess just because we've seen Hades in the solo lane doesn't mean that's exactly where this pick has to go.
Right, could be flexible, but has been where we've seen the most success from this Hades in the SPL so far. A couple Hunters getting banned away, one largely targeted towards the mid lane, you would think, with the AMC, and then Heimdall Ho Yi taken away from Stewart. Again, I'll echo a lot of what I was saying about Baronic, about Stu as well. I think Stu is in a spot as a carry where, given a good composition around him, given a pick that he's comfortable with, is a really good look for the Solar Scarabs. 5-2-4 against the Jade Dragons on Cupid in the Game 2 loss yesterday. So far from a bad Game 2 for Stewart. Heimdall Ho Yi, a couple of Stewart's stronger picks. So I think the Bolt's mind in the correct place here, sensing, I suppose, still the entire duo lane needing to get drafted unless Ardio flexes over to support. And something Yarkor is very good at playing. Could absolutely be a pick there. It ends up being a Khepri ban. So Khepri left open a bit later on here in this draft. And might have been a really nice pick for the Bolts, but it'll get taken away.
Yeah, I still think Cupid Ardio would be a pretty decent kill lane if the Scarabs wanted to go towards something like that, but of course Scary D can pilot that Ardio just as easy if that is the option that they want to look to. The Bolts, however, are the ones that have to grab a pick here. I do think they need some physical damage, possibly a Hunter. Many were taken away.
Feel the weight of the world!
Looks like holding that a bit longer, and we'll just grab the Atlas. Now,
Mid.
yeah, I was gonna say, like, we know that Atlas is more often than not played in support. We've seen him played in solo, but I just saw Scream pilot it yesterday, and unfortunately, it looked really good as well. So I still think Atlas will just be going over that support role, but the Bolts are gonna keep us guessing there till the end.
To be clear, it was Scream mid. So not only was there an interesting pick, but it was also a role swap. To your point, I mean, you were talking about Atlas mid,
Your
but
time
I think a lot of
has
people
come.
hear Scream Atlas and assume that he tried to play it in the jungle. That was not the case. Bolts maybe throwing a curveball back to the Scarab, see if they have an answer for the Atlas that did really well against them yesterday. Robin, Chiron, final two picks here for the Solar Scarab. So I think that does show us RDO support. Likely Robin over in the solo lane then, Trelly. Haven't seen Robin solo in a little while. Do you think there's still some value in that pick?
If it's between the Robin and the Lance solo,
I guess either could be solo
I think
and
I would
jungle.
prefer Lance just because Robin benefits so much from this new Mace build. I mean, it's not new. It's just you build red items, you do damage.
Right.
Not to say that Robin can't be that backline diver that builds hybrid as well. Neither one of them love laning up against Hades, so I guess in that degree it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who you send in that lane, you're going to be getting out pressured by Hades regardless. But I just think Robin's so good right now in the jungle with that build. You know, you get Transcendence, Titan's Bane, Heartseeker. Those are your big damage items, and at that point you're chunking. But, you know, for me they're interchangeable. Not going to matter too much. As long as you have the Morgan that can transform into the one that's doing more damage, you're going to be just fine. I do like the Chiron as well in the back to help, not only with the cleanse, but the tons of damage that Centaurs will bring. The Bolts, however, are going to round out this draft with the Ratatosker. So a possible couple of swaps that we've been thinking about thus far could be the Hades in the mid and then, you know, Rat jungle, Pele solo. I mean, there's a few different switches around. I don't think Pele solo is going to be the option. I do think Pele in the jungle for the life of me. But between Rat and Hades in the solo lane, you know, you're not going to have Rat in mid, right? You certainly could, but it's not going to be the best bit.
Probably the least spicy option is Rat solo, Hades mid. But maybe the most likely option there as well. So Baskin, if we're just going to assume Ratatosker solo, haven't seen it in a little bit. Again, was very popular. It's something Variety has played pretty well in the past. Is there a spot in the meta right now for Ratatosker solo in your mind?
I think so. I think as long as, you know, Soul Eater did get a little bit of a nerf, but is still pretty prominent. We just saw Baskin pick it up on King Arthur yesterday. So if you're in a position where you want to build a hybrid solo laner that's not going to get too far behind, you know, Rat needs a few items online, and then after that, you can essentially just clear waves between towers, rotate in through the Cosmos, use that global presence, and just make mid's life miserable. What I don't like about the Rat pick is that you just gave Bronic a pretty solid transformation, but if the plan is to just get Erendite on this Pele, make sure that you always know where the Morgan is. Maybe you're not too concerned with the transformations. You're just saying, hey, Bronic's not going to be, he's going to be largely dealt with as long as we put some pressure onto that Morgan. So if that's the case, then the Bolts, not only have they kept us guessing with the draft, but also they put together a pretty good way of dealing with that, Morgan.
Yeah, talk to me a little bit about what you see then in team fights later on here in this game. Seems like hi-rez loves to dash in, Pillars of Agony, pulling opponents in. Pele really good at following up, dashing in. Ratatosker, pretty easy ultimate to dive in there as well. Do you think the Bolts have just a run-in, dive style of composition? How do you see them trying to play these team fights?
Well, it looks like, I mean, I don't think Pele or hi-rez love being the first one in the fight. You prefer to see, like, oh, Chiron dashed out. Now we can go in. Now we can make that. But who's making Chiron dash out? So if Atlas can get some nice setup for the team, I think they're able to dive the backline pretty effectively. It really just depends on where that pressure on the map is.
Olympus Bolts and Solar Scarabs both trying to avoid starting off their Phase 3 0-2. Game number 1 between the Bolts and the Scarabs. Down with Gormizer and Mifflin.
That's right, and I'm excited to see this one, Mifflin. Again, watching how the Scarabs adapt to the roster changes, admittedly forced upon them, right? Not active decisions for them. Every time it feels like they start to get comfortable and maybe start taking the rise, something changes. Baronic, the only player, I guess, initially on this squad who has been rocking it since the inception. Otherwise, all new pickups. Stewart, though, has had a really, really great year. Sam, Yark, world champion MVP. Scary D, just straight up a world champion. Feels like there's a lot of talent, but you're going up against equal talent over there in the Bolts.
And the Bolts haven't had to go through the tribulations of figuring out what our new identity is going to be with new players. Sure, they've had to replace one.
They got Baskin.
Baskin's pretty good, right? And he's got some experience playing with these guys beforehand, as well as Soul Lane being a little bit more of a plug-and-play role. I think that's going to be a much easier adaptation for them. So all eyes on the Solar Scarabs and how they elect to play going forward. I had said briefly during the previous test segment, I thought the last set we had seen between the Scarabs and the Dragons, we didn't get too many opportunities to see whether or not the Solar Scarabs were adapting, how they're going to play around Yarkor, because the Jade Dragon just happened to play the fastest brand of Smite in the league. The Olympus Bolts are a team that are a little bit more likely to take a slower approach, at least to the first 4 or 5 minutes. Could give some breathing space to the Scarabs.
Already getting some good damage on the hardcore.
Yikes.
All they need is a couple more autos to find the kill. But there's good body blocks, good disengage from the Scarabs. And just a teensy bit of healing from that RDO coming into play, but it's not helping out Stewart right now. All they need is a little more. The pulse is there. The damage is not quite enough for Stewart, but it is there for Hardcore. And Bolts get first blood a minute in.
Yarkor gets over aggressive in the lane, tries to put out a little bit more damage. Looked like he wanted to use the charge to clear archers as well as poke out Barracuda, but didn't quite have that opportunity. The archers live a little too long. Level 2 takes a little too long to come. Stewart forced to step up, block out some of those autos, nearly loses his life for it as well. And our hypothesis that the Olympus Bolts might allow the Solar Scarabs to breathe just a little bit, well, it's not looking so good.
Slowly stifled, quickly actually, never mind, quickly stifled.
Expeditiously.
In terms of that. I do want to ask you, and since we're hovering over the solo lane right now with the camera, I'll ask this now because Trelly had mentioned it on the desk. Kind of preferring the Raven in the jungle as opposed to in solo lane. We see that it has gone solo. Do you have a preference for either one? I mean, I think they both have their merits.
I think that it's really dependent on what the jungler is that you pick up with your Raven. Hold on a second. Speaking of that jungler, Sanford Soccer hovering nearby. Probably just trying to pick up that Maku. Raven is really, really good in the early game. He's one of the strongest level 3 through 7 junglers in the game. Yeah. He just has incredible pressure, is very, very safe. Maybe a little safer than Yarkor is.
Yeah, a little aggressive.
Okay, he's fine.
Yeah, he's fine. So we can talk more about the junglers as long as he doesn't dash in, and he is not. So we can go back over there. Maybe not. This is the other question I was going to have for you. The Pele picked up by Venenu, going in for a red buff invade.
It looks so simple, too.
And yeah, just kind of does it, right? There's not anything really crazy about that. He's an assassin in the jungle and is able to find that clear. So you can touch on that as well. I mean, Pele being played in mid, that versus the Ratatosker, where those go, but also just in general, assassins returning to the mid lane.
Yeah, I mean, Assassin's return to mid, I'm not sure how permanent a change this is. I feel like this is probably a couple of week thing, a fad. But if I were to take one mid, Pele's pretty high up on that priority order. Back when Soul Eater was core and a little bit stronger pre-nerf, maybe I feel a little bit better about it then. But what Pele does better than just about any other assassin in the game is that she is the queen of the 1-for-1. Go in with the Volcanic Eruption, find your CC, auto-cancel with the Pyro class. You're going to get your one guy, and then occasionally you're getting two. No matter what, though, as long as you're trading out for a priority target, It's a very powerful tool.
Oh, Vin does need a powerful tool right now because he is just surrounded. 3 Scarabs, 1 kill, and they're able to take down the mid laner for the Bolts.
Just simple, man. I mean, Baronic somehow ticks to 5 before Ven does, despite the red buff invade going to Ven. Transforms into the Pele. Looks for what could have been a 1v1, but quickly devolved into a 3 versus 1, favoring the Solar Scarabs. And that's not what you want to see from Pele. You pick that god for pressure. She's not there to sit and farm and scale into the late game. That's not to say her scaling isn't good. It's pretty decent. But you really want to be the trend setter, the pace setter in the center of the map. And falling down this early doesn't bode well.
Yeah, red buff invade, thumbs up. Getting killed by the other team, thumbs down as far as it goes. Ult available there now for Vin, as well as opening up for everybody on the Bolts. And since Hardcore is a stance switcher, it doesn't necessarily matter that he's still level 4 right now. So everybody that needs it has an ultimate available. I'm on the red buff right now, surrounded by the Bolts. It's getting aggressed on. There's Ratatoskr in the air. The knockup's going to be good on the Hardcore. They're going for Baronic. The damage is there, and they're going to knock him down. Venenu credit for the kill, and they're turning it around onto Sam. They want this jungler, and they're going to find it. 2 kills for the price of 3 ults, and they're able to get the red buff as well.
I can't believe Sam went back in there. He rode the ultimate out, decides to dash in aggressively. Instant turnaround for the Olympus Bolts. I'm thinking once you already realize, oh, Baronic doesn't have ultimate, he's forced to use the beads by Lazarus' ult, Ven's already put out all that damage, you gotta know when to fold him, and that was a fold him situation. Yeah. Instead, the Solar Scarabs try the best to dig in their heels and fight back, but not enough people nearby. Odds aren't looking so good, and the Olympus Bolts realizing, hey, a lot of the strengths of this Scarabs draft lost once Changeling is down. Might as well force that engagement. And again, that is a play that is afforded to the Bolts by that early invade from Ven. Had Ven not walked up on second rotation of red buff, they don't have timer. They're not able to force that fight. So again, it's that pressure developed from Pele in mid that is giving these opportunities to the Bolts.
And going to keep our eyes, I think, on Venenu, and specifically that combination with Lasbra, because it feels like both of them are very easily set up to be this level 5, now level 7 menace because of the engage that Lasbra is going to bring to them. Definitely a conversation for the Bolts to have about how aggressive they can be. Virtually the opposite of what I expect out of Bera, although impressive that they were able to get first blood over here. Freya's not someone that you're supposed to talk about for like 18 minutes.
That's dated info, man. Zatman said it best in the previous phase. This is an early, mid, and late game god. She just hits hard. And
there's a good example. Immediately, half health onto Stuart. Venenu's here. There's going to be the ult to close the gap, and the autos are enough to get it. 4-1 lead the Bolts. And the duo lane carry for the Scarabs goes down.
Loving what we're seeing from Ven, utilizing all that mobility. Now it's Baskin's turn to rotate out. Just leaping forward is enough to scare Sam for Soccer into that ultimate. Scary D on the rotation through. He'll win the 1v1. I doubt Baskin gives it over to him. So it's just a clean pick on the left-hand side. Olympus Bolts looking very good, but it does not come without cost. Barracuda utilizing that Valkyrie's discretion means that ganks could come his way.
Jay potentially caught out, drops the ult. Gonna have a little bit of shred with him. No teammates anywhere nearby, so just trying to stay alive. What a beautiful pull! Takes 2 off, gets to Vin and to safety, and on top of it, Lasbra on the other side of the map gets a kill onto Sam. They're chasing down Scary D. The ult gets the Robin a little bit further, but it's a blink, it's a stun, it's some damage, and a double for the jungler. They're finding more and more as Bera takes down Stuart. The Scarabs have no safe havens on the map, and forget about a slow pace, Mifflin. They are running this show.
Man, the Olympus Bolts read the answer sheet. The J Dragons blew up the Solar Scarabs. The Bolts were like, yo, write that down, write that down. and it has just worked out for them across the board. The Scarabs are not allowed to breathe. What a tough situation to find yourself in, and it's still happening.
Oh, no.
Okay, he whiffed. He whiffed. Thank God for Baronic. Unfortunate for Ven. Get back to base, bud. That is tough.
Well, this might be a chance. Finally, Sam able to find some brief reprieve from the damage going their way. Unfortunately now getting bullied around. At least it's an Atlas, right? So the damage, about a third of the health bar there for Sam. But still alive. Gets a kill onto the mid laner. Now 2-2-1 for Venenu. And balances, maybe balances things out slightly. I mean, if you look at it, Mifflin, it's not often I get to do this. 3,000 gold, 8 minutes in, just a little shy there for the Bolts. They're pushing the 2,800 number. And that's ridiculous for the pace of this game. Well, I guess it matches the pace of the game. It's ridiculous for the pace of a MOBA.
Yeah, this has been a TDM across the board, and only one of them's doing the killing, it would seem. 7-2 across the top. I would have liked to have seen Ven just commit for the kill. Once you ult into a tower, you got to realize someone's nearby, right? Like, someone's going to finish me off. Just commit to the Bronic kill. You might have traded out, but it would have been better for them the 0 for 1.
Yeah, making sure that you get something in your favor would be nice. Maybe they're just waiting a little bit longer because Bronic, again, nowhere is safe. Nothing is sacred for the Scarabs.
No way.
Finally, they get under the tier 1. Bronic, Sam, Hardcore still alive. Red buff respawning, and 4 bolts have their eyes on this small jungle objective. Hardcore's there, immediately goes in, trying to get the kill on Lasbra. A lot of damage, and no ult available for the Ratatoskr. Finally killed off, but it trades out Sam
Ven's
for
living?
Lasbra. Then Vin taken down for Bronic. 2 for 2, and it's up to this Whoop, up to the damage from Barra with barely any mana. He's still going to find 2. A pull in from Jake, but no big follow-up. Still favorable for the bolts, but finally some scrappiness from the Scarabs.
All these explosive fights happening in mid. I'd almost forgotten what a massive threat Barracuda is very quickly becoming. Are able to secure that red buff are the Olympus Bolts. Keep your eyes on Scary D. He's going for the high rotation. All Stewart has to do is keep these 2 in his sights, Scary. Ultimate available. If he can connect that route, Barracuda's nearly but close enough to the tower. No longer an appetizing engagement. The Solar Scarab's going to let that one fizzle out. But keep your eyes on Barra. Hastened ring already finished. 1 level lead over Stewart. 4-0 start for the Freya.
That might be one of the, like, outside of Kali, that might be one of the scariest things in SMITE. It's a 4-0 Freya.
I'm more scared of the Freya, man. Kali's got to at least get in my face. Freya's like doing it from far away. How's that fair?
Yeah, and not only that, she can, like, if things get dangerous, like, just go up in the air or just straight up banish you.
Range CC, plenty of lifesteal. Kali's got death immunity, though. So, there's that.
There's checks and balances for each of them. You don't want them 4-0, I think, is the main point. 3-1 there for Lasbra, 3-3 for Venenu. So a lot of kills mainly happening onto the mid laner here. But, I mean, we've seen that in the past, right? Pele, Scream will have it happen where it's like, yeah, I'm going to go in, and I'm just going to set up everybody else to do really well. It might cost me my life, but it is going to be a big play for them. That plus the play so far from Jake's Atlas. This might be the rarest moment we've had this game where it's been at least 30 seconds with no one trying to get aggressive.
Yeah, with Pyromancer up, though. Maybe they go there. Just group up. Scary D's playing pretty far forward. No backup from the Solar Scarabs on the right side of the map. Maybe just showing presence to keep the Olympus Bolts guessing around this gold tree. 4 stack from the Scarabs there. Aren't going to move themselves forward, and instead, maybe a pick on a Barra if the root can connect.
There's going to be the lockdown. Good damage,
sure,
half health already, but it's the turnaround for Barra immediately into the ult, and he gets the kill onto Sam. He's trying to escape now. There's the banish, there's the Aegis, and the jukes to make sure that Centaurus isn't good enough. But the masterful shot is Stewart finally able to shut down that Freya and get some revenge. But what do the bolts do? They grab the Pyromancer in return. So a 1-for-1 trade with a little bit extra gold for the Chaos side team.
Must have been a miscommunication there. Scary D now in some trouble. Should be able to escape. Still has access to that ultimate. No way the bolts chase this one out. The only thing that costs Scary D his life is if he gets greedy for that blue buff. Wasn't given too much of a time to think about it. Cleared out immediately. But I think that was a miscommunication between Sam for Soccer and Yarkor. Yark backs up, wants to pick up the Scepter, starts clearing that camp. Sam said, no, man, we're going on the Barracuda. And Barracuda said, all right, good luck. Does too much damage already with 2 rings finished. All that lifesteal already available. Sam for Soccer took, what was that, 4 auto attacks and then an ult, and that was just his life through the HP shield of Lancelot's ultimate. A tough situation, to be sure. Maybe too little too late. Yeah, you waited a long time to rotate on the Freya.
Yeah, unfortunately for Stewart, it's cost him a lot of lane pressure. Best exemplified by that, Venenu comes over, blinks forward, ults, and just kills him. Not a lot to that one when it comes down to breakdowns, just Pele kit. Now maybe a rotation back towards mid. Essentially becoming a second jungler, though. I think I've seen Vin roaming around more than I've actually seen them farming in their own lane. Maybe looking for a little bit more. No, they'll just back off mid Harpies, things like that. As finally, again, the Scarabs are given a little bit of room to breathe, but 3,500 gold down, 13 minutes in. They're definitely feeling the burn.
with Pyromancer down as well. The Olympus Bolts have had the advantage in the duo lane. Now 2-level lead for Barracuda over Stewart. Could be time to start thinking about that Gold Fury. You've got phenomenal burn potential. And, well, the classic lineups here. Baskin has left the lane. It's now hovering on the left-hand side. The Bolts are going to go one of two ways with this. Well, one of three, I suppose, if Baskin decides to rotate all the way back to the right-hand side of the map. Could either just commit to the Gold Fury or force the engagement. With the lead you're already playing with, I'd like to see the Bolts force a fight here. The Solar Scarabs in a position now where they can no longer just allow things to happen. If the Olympus Bolts get this gold, it's just going to balloon out of control. The Solar Scarabs need to answer these questions immediately.
It's a little bit of aggression from Baron Jake, none more than what we've seen already. Red buff is going to be spawning there for the Scarabs. Big point of contention. Immediate rotations coming in, at least from Vin. Jake looking that way. Lasbra this side of the jungle. Ults available for everyone in the game. Doesn't seem like they have that much interest in going for it this time, though. Maybe just kind of realizing that, well, they've been able to get away with it unless they want to hard commit to it, or if, like you said, maybe they want to go for a Gold Fury soon, or maybe just a pick on the hardcore, gets banished, gets picked up, and is just getting eliminated. Does have the dash, creates just enough space, but they've taken 2 ults on their side already. Sam Stewart trying to get something going, but instead it's just cost them so much. Sam still trying to engage, but the knockup not going to connect. A great blink, but then a stun. The follow-up damage should be good, and the follow-through from the Bolts gets the kill. Vin half health and taken down. Scary D with a great rotation. Baskin ult still available. Pillar of Agony gets the beads from Baronic. That's going to force the Scarabs to fall back. Barra still has some damage to play with, but not doing anywhere near as much to Scary D as he would have liked.
It looked to me like Sam, yet again, similar to the situation we saw between him and Yark on the left-hand side, just gets over-aggressive too early.
This is all aggression, though, from the Scarabs. Barra, Banish, Aegis, all used, just trying to escape. No ult available to go into the sky, just has the damage, has the lifesteal, but it's not enough to live through this onslaught, although way longer than he deserves to. The Scarabs finally able to put up another kill, and was a very egregious game for them earlier, getting reined in ever so slightly. 13-7, still favoring the Bolts, and about 2,700 gold down from that 35.
Yeah, that early bulwark for Scary D putting in the work. Barracuda hit him plenty of times. You wouldn't believe it looking at his HP, though. Scary D's did not move whatsoever. Now 20 seconds left on the Freya respawn. Solar Scarabs 5 strong, only about 3,000 gold down. I'd like to see one of these teams start to group up on this Gold Fury. You've got a significant opportunity here, but with Sanford Soccer all the way on the right-hand side of the map, I suppose that opportunity just going to be lost out. A win's a win, though. The Solar Scarabs getting that pick on Ibarra, considering how fed he was, 5-1 at the tail end of that fight, now 5-2. He's worth a good amount of gold on his own.
See, the minute I want to say anything, Vin goes in on to Baronic. And like clockwork, that ult has been used. 6-4-2 now for Veneno as he takes down the opposing mid laner. And this Morgan has just not gotten the chance to flourish so far.
No, Baronic is just a very easy target for this Pele. It seems like the best response is to transform, but Blink Knockup comes out pretty quick. Olympus Bolts now grouped up on the Gold Fury. No response from the Solar Scarabs. That one's going down for free. Now you can start to slowly work your way over to the other side of the map. Pyromancers respawn. Could even start sieging some of these towers. We're into that portion of the game as well. The Olympus Bolts have just been stifling this match.
Trebuchet on left getting dealt with by the Freya and the Pele. So Barra Vin not available for the Pyromancer as of right now. Sitting at 1/3 HP over the wall is Jake throwing some damage. Scarabs are able to secure this one. They don't have the DPS available around them to maybe burn down hardcore the way they wanted to. It's not going to stop them from getting aggressive, though. Lasbra with the stun. They do let that one start to fade away. So they pull back. A little bit of a damage check, I think, there for hardcore. And he remains at half health, so he's fine to be able to get in, get a pyro, and get some small wins for the Scarabs.
That's smart from the Scarabs. Just taking away anything that the Olympus Bolts can go and farm up without forcing a fight is so smart. Speaking of forced fights, though, Baronic has one coming his way.
Yeah, finally is able to get a stun in retaliation.
That's not a fight.
But that's not a fight, no, Mifflin. It is a slaughter, and it's always Veneno leading the way. But there is one Centaur shot. Masterful shot will connect slow, and the damage is there, but not enough to kill off Veneno. Keeping things, I want to say, a little more in favor of the Bolts, and every step of the way, it feels like it's 2 steps forward for them, maybe about 1 step, half step sometimes for the Scarabs. That's just not coming often enough to make sure that they stay equal.
Yeah, I think Baronic just needs a bailout, man. This lane matchup has now become so poor that anytime he locks eyes with Ven, he's going to likely lose his life. Maybe have a lane swap. I don't think Baskin is an easy matchup. The Hades up against the Morgan has some pretty decent opportunities just like silence out the stealth or something along those lines, but it's going to be a little bit more difficult for that Hades to solo you on cooldown. Baronic just needs farm, and he's not getting it in mid.
Yeah, 3 levels down now, 15 for Baronic, 18 for Venenu. Just 1 level behind the level per minute mark as we go over the 19 minutes here. So the Bolts, with a very comfortable lead, have managed to push themselves up beyond the 4,000 mark to the 4,400, 4,500 if they can get a little more farm on their side. Red buff once again spawned for the Scarabs, only worth mentioning. Oh, never mind. It's already taken down. I was going to say, Venenu was out there on the prowl for a little bit of a fight. Luckily for them, they don't have to worry about it this time around. No Fury, no Pyromancer. I mean, Fire Giant's the only thing to really go for right now. And it feels like that, even with this kind of lead for the Bolts, you can't just pull it. Maybe fake it and go for a fight, but it doesn't feel like that's the easy call. Then again, look at this grouping.
I mean, it's nearly 4,000 gold in the lead. Experience pretty dire as well. I think the Olympus Bolts can group up just about anywhere on the map and force that engagement. A tier 1 tower could be pretty nice. Take down this tier 1 in mid, move your way over to the Soul Tower as well, and then it becomes a little bit easier to start looking at that Fire Giant.
How have there been 22 kills? Not a single tower has fallen on the map just yet. Centaurus shots onto Barracuda, and immediately 1/3 HP. There's that massive shot just hanging around, and it's going to connect and get the Freya down to about half, but not enough for anyone to follow up on. It's going to be 2 ults dropped there by the Bolts from the duo lane, just the Centaurus from the Scarabs. Showing that even though there's been a bit of a deficit, actually closing the gap a little bit. What was 2 levels for Barra is now sitting around 1.5. It was 3 levels for Ven. It's still close to 3 levels. It's like 2.8. But still, a little closer there for Baronic.
Yeah, Baronic has become the jungler for his team. He has cleared out every single camp on the left-hand side. So that's the majority of where his farm has come from recently. I suppose the Olympus Bolts are struggling to take out these structures. Not having a traditional hunter means that it's primarily the Freya. Freya, just about the worst magical hunter at taking out these types of structures.
Yeah.
Very good at neutral objectives. Primal Fury on respawn, Pyromancer, Fire Giant, all going to get burned very fast if Barracuda's involved. Otherwise, I'm thinking if they want to take down a more significant structure than a tier 1, they're going to need to take a fight first, the Olympus Bolts, that is. The Solar Scarabs, though, already showing presence on this left-hand side of the map. Baronic's starting to close up a bit of that experience gap, as you alluded to as well. It means that he is slowly starting to become a threat in base stance. Now Spear of Desolation, Doom Orb, Divine Ruin all done. The Olympus Bolts need to be concerned about how much damage the Morrigan can do before the Transform. You've got some pretty decent Transform targets as well now. Scary D, incredibly tanky, has shown very good ability to shut down Barracuda. This Freya not really dealing with the Raven very well. I imagine he couldn't do with 2 of them. That'd be pretty good, I bet.
Yeah, it would be very difficult. Unfortunately, not difficult is hardcore, as we can see right here. Venenu and Barra just combo together, along with Jake. The CC helps out, and it gives them a very clean kill onto the now support for the Scarabs. World's MVP still. And they turn their attention kind of twofold. One to the tier 1 in mid. They knock that objective down. Now with a grouping of 5 on left, you have to imagine this Fury, yeah, it's going to get pulled soon. Barra starting it up. Not a single Scarab in the vicinity. So it feels like a very easy pickup for the Bolts.
Maybe the Solar Scarabs with this grouping can at least take down the Pyromancer. Fire Giant's certainly not an option, considering how quickly the Bolts had dealt with that Primal Fury. It's been slow play from the Olympus Bolts as far as objectives are concerned.
Yeah.
Everywhere else, it has been a breakneck pace. Now, though, the Olympus Bolts starting to approach 5th item, starting to upgrade some of those relics, feel confident in their ability to group up on these objectives. Pyromancer taken with extreme prejudice. The only one nearby is Scary D, and well, he's not going to be around too much longer. Jake's got anything to say about it.
Jake's locked down. Jake might end up going down. Nothing to say here. The Lasber's up in the sky. They're going for the re-engage. They get Baronic. The knockup is good. The stun is a little better, but there's the transformation into the Pele for the disengage. Gets the Morgan out of here. Centaurus shots clean, but not enough damage to find any kills. Still a good clapback from the Scarabs to make sure that the Bolts stay away.
If the Scarabs pull this Fire Giant, I actually love that call. You know you force back at least 2. You can enforce an engagement on the Olympus Bolts. Barracuda would have been forced to walk in on his own. You might be able to desync some of these deaths, create a situation where you're actually keeping the Olympus Bolts on the back foot. Instead, a complete reset to neutral. So the Bolts, even in losing Jake, don't lose just about anything else. It's just getting your own camps inside of the Solar Scarabs and pull Jake's back up. So regroup. The Olympus Bolts, they're in a better position than they were like right before Jake died. So Pyromancer's a pretty decent trade. Go ahead, stack up on that Fire Giant, force the Scarabs to respond.
Have to see where they decide to put this focus. Vin is hunting. Vin does not care. Look, he's level 20. Gold is not on Vin's mind anymore. Laning phase, not on Vin's mind. Then again, I don't know if that was there the entire time. He's got his items. He's just looking for blood.
6 items, just a luxury item for Pele as far as I'm concerned. So he's full build. Scary D. I would say in some trouble, but that guy's tanky.
Yeah, look at Barra's shots here. Barely denting this health bar. Instead, it's Scary D turning around, starting to chase. Half health finally. But there's going to be the burn down. Sam just caught out. Baronic knocked down by Lasber and the Bolts. Surging forward with the kills. Scary D, half health. Hardcore just gone.
Goodness.
Stuart, nothing to salvage this one for him. Finally able to get to that tier 2 and just stay alive. But at what cost? You lose 3 of your teammates. You might lose a little bit more. There's the blink. There's the stun. There's the kill. Stuart just can't escape it. Lasbra running through the tier 2 with a little help from Vin. Scary's going to get 1. Does not have the Mystic Rush to close the gap for the other. And Mifflin, all of that. And the Bolts are getting the Fire Giant right now anyway. 4 kills for 1, plus the FG, plus a 10,000 gold lead, and now an advantage to start pushing on the map.
Might as well take some tier 2s. You got so much time while the Solar Scarabs are still in the grayscale. Scary D is incredibly tanky. He realized it in that last engagement. The only one to survive. First one in, last one out. But maybe doesn't do enough damage. They can really stop this push. The Olympus Bolts now can do about no wrong on the map. Scary steps up. He's okay though. Again, Robin, super tanky. No way he dies. I'm channeling my caster's curse. It's not working.
Just try, like, get some sort of lightning to strike this dude. 2-1 and 2, an early death for the Robin. Since then, has just felt untouchable. Good return damage as well. Scarabs charge up a Trebuchet. They keep things as neutral as they can. 3 towers still standing for them, 5 on the other side for the Bolts. Fire Giant on 4. And with this reset, Mifflin, it feels like we're about to see resurgence forward. 6th item for Pele, you mentioned, essentially feeling like a luxury item. But now you get a Heartseeker on Lasbra as well. You're starting to look at 6th items there for Baskin and Barra. Feels like the entire team just got a big bonus.
But fortunately for the Solar Scarabs, the weaknesses of this composition from the Olympus Bolts that reared their head earlier during that tier 1 tower siege will continue to be there. You don't just take structures. That's not what this composition is built for. So if the Solar Scarabs can elongate some of these fights, burn through some of these resources, force Ven into those 1-for-1 trades, because Pele has not been taking 1-for-1s. You don't go 1-for-1 and end up 9-4.
Yeah.
Maybe shut him down. Then you can start to rally around these Phoenixes. The siege potential of the Olympus Bolts largely mitigated. Not exactly the best comp for it, but the base defense of the Solar Scarabs is not weak. If Baronic gets a decent transformation, if Scary D can create some space in that back line, Centaurus clearly dealing a whole lot of damage from real far away, I think the Scarabs have got some fight back potential here.
Yeah, 4, 4, and 3, 3rd on the damage charts there for Stuart. So despite not necessarily having a clean lane phase, things have been going well for him. Unfortunately for Baronic, there's no chance for a transformation. They just go in, but it is the 1-for-1. Lasbra might end up making it 2-for-1. No, that ult gets him out of there. Left side Phoenix taken down by the other 3 Bolts. So kill for kill, and maybe a necessary disengage for him. Scary D scooped up, tossed back by Jake. Centaurus is going to connect slightly onto Barra there. There's going to be a close gap from Sam, and they're trying to go for this fight, and they're winning it as of right now. It will be a 1-for-1. No, Sam still alive and able to escape. A great defense from the Scarabs just to get some kills. Gonna slowly, but burn down Baskin. No, Baskin's gonna burn them down instead. He's surrounded by 3. You gotta think this falls apart for him. Finally, Sam able to make sure that the Hades stays down. But what a fight from both sides.
Lasbra's back. Yarkor take it down. Scary D alone against 2 of the Olympus Bolts. Can Jake Find the CC, overhead kick, avoids nothing, stun connects. How long in that ultimate? Only one more slice of the pie. Scary D might be able to work his way out of there, but not in time. Lasbra double kill. The Solar Scarabs may have found the defense. They may have kept the base, but left side Phoenix will fall, and the Olympus Bolts take the team fight on the tail end.
I mean, just a beautiful engage for them that maybe overstays its welcome a little bit, right? Just all over the place, scattered in terms of who's going to kill what and where. And not just from the Scarabs, comes from the Bolts as well. Like you said, they get the left side Phoenix. And ultimately still the advantage, right? You go 1 for 1, you were 9-4, now you're 10-5 for Vin. You get an Oni Fury. Fire Giant's going to be coming up in, what, about a minute after it wears off here in a few seconds from Jake. Other than that, you've still got the map state in your favor. 2 exposed Phoenixes on the other side.
I'm just thinking about a world where Basket has even a little bit more CDR, right? Like, that fear comes up one more time, the polyproc connects, some of those auto attacks. He was so close to actually just getting a quadra kill there. If it just lines up a little bit better, the Solar Scarabs able to shut him down just in time. I'm living in a fantasy world. Thinking about that one.
It's a scary fantasy, too, if you're a Scarabs fan.
It is a spooky one. Well, it's not much different from reality, though. I mean, this is a scary reality if you're a Solar Scarabs fan, because there's not a whole lot of fight-back potential here. Taking a Tier 1, getting a little bit of global golden experience for your team helps out a bit, but the Olympus Bolts have got their eyes on the largest prize. Fire Giant on that right-hand side. Ward coverage already favoring the Chaos team. They had time to go out, drop wards, head back to base, and buy more. That's not a luxury afforded to the Solar Scarabs. They're on an eco round, if you would. They can't afford them.
As it turns out, 16,000 gold is kind of a lot to try and deal with. You lose a Tier 1 tower, that is a literal drop in the bucket for the Bolts. They do not care outside of anything it might mean for specifically Titan health. It is very much something they can disregard. Meanwhile, it's set up for the Fire Giant, like you highlighted. Scary D and Veronic kind of tag teaming here. Get aggressive, burn about a third of Jake's health bar. Still kind of showcase that it's not easy to kill off the Atlas. You had mentioned the transformations from the Morrigan. Look, 1, 6, and 5, not a pretty slash line here for Veronic.
Been a while since we saw it transform as well.
Yeah, well, but he hasn't been allowed to. It's been the knockups, right? Every single engage from the Bolts has been immediately onto this Morrigan.
Yeah, I mean, Veronic had a pretty poor matchup loading into this game, but I gotta think you could have drafted around that. You could have maybe made some changes on map to create some space for him. Now he's level 20, nearly full build, has the poly, so he is a threat so long as he isn't just hitting Jake. So I will be keeping my eyes on Veronic. He could certainly be a win condition for his team here.
Could have been right there. Finn has to use the ult for a disengage this time. That alone feels like a big win, specifically for Veronic, although it might not be enough. No, Veronic walks right into Lasbro, waiting in the jungle now, up onto the tree of Yggdrasil. Is this Ratatosker? Where is his target? Who does he want? It's Stuart in the back line for the jungler, but not enough damage immediately. Dashes out of there, is able to help get a kill, but loses his life in the process. Stuart barely alive, but able to escape this. Left side Phoenix goes down. Fire minions in the base for the Bolts. They are ignoring the middle Phoenix and just running it down to the end. The Titan is in danger, and Bera's got the damage. Bolts are going to take a sounding game number 1.
It was just dominance from minute 0 to the very end. The Olympus Bolts set a pace the Solar Scarabs were not capable of matching. It was in every single lane. You can't leave that at the feet of any individual player. Solo had some struggles. Yeah. Duo got taken out early. Veronic, of course, has an unfortunate match as well. I think this is one where you have to just wash the slate clean, go into the next match, and get a different draft maybe.
Yeah, that one, I mean, you called it really early on where it was just team deathmatch. There was 22 kills in like 10 minutes or something ridiculous like that. They just started up. The Bolts first blood a minute in the duo lane of all places. And every other lane fell into that exact style of game.
Chiron Artio versus Atlas Freya. Atlas Freya first bloods on second wave. Probably shouldn't be happening.
Maybe a little bit to go back to in the books. Maybe a little bit play on field as well at the very beginning there for the Scarabs. Things got out of hand quick, and the question is going to be whether or not they can bounce back, or if the Bolts kind of take a win that was that resounding for them. 16,000, 17,000 gold by the end of it. and just bring that into game number 2 with them. We'll see how they're
Bring the
feeling,
gold?
what the Scarabs are feeling. Hopefully not.
Yeah,
that
I
would
don't
be
think that's allowed.
a little busted, and we'd have to talk to the admins about that. No, yeah, leave the gold behind, but bring the energy as we take a quick break and then get into game number 2.
What if we could stop the pain from hurting? What if we knew that love could mend the spirit? Broken into reverse that broken feeling. Just say I do, and I will follow wherever you may go. I know it's so uncertain, but I'm tired of hurting now. All my tears and searching, gonna open up my curtains now. 'Cause I don't wanna miss out. Take me on a big adventure. Baby, if we stay together, we could stay young forever. Where would you go if you could time travel? Take me on a big adventure. Baby, if we stay together, we could stay young forever. Where would you go if you could time travel? What if we could pick up the missing pieces? What if we knew the love would never let us down? Broken into reverse the broken feeling. To say I do, and I will follow wherever you may go. I know it's so uncertain, but I'm tired of hurting now. All my tears and searching, gonna open up my curtains now. 'Cause I don't wanna miss out. Take me on a big adventure. Baby, if we stay together, we could stay young forever. Where would you go if you could time travel? Take me on a big adventure. Baby, if we stay together, we could stay young forever. Where would you go if you could time travel?
Lorito, dime si te acuerdas cuando estaba aquí. Purple flowers, escuchando a Dakiti. Siempre en mi mente cuando piense en ti. Hablándome en otro idioma, sí, baby. Sarahanda marejo, Sarahanda marejo. Dímelo lento, baby, más lento. 사랑한다고 말해.
사랑한다고 말해줘. Keep me up when I dime que me amas. We can
술처럼 나잖아. We can take it slow. Banging on the despacito flow. 반에서 처음 봐서 baby 혼자 있어. Yeah. 시간 있어 여기 나가 술 좀 마시자. 밖에 놀아라면 먹자. 아직 집에 가지 마. You could tell me any day. 요즘 너만 생각해. broken 너무 뭔가 봐. 답이 계속 나는 버릇한 들어봐. You and I 늦었지만 better not than never baby alright. 반응해 험한 말해줘. Do or die. 문제라면 baby no I got the answers tonight. Yeah. Dime si te acuerdas cuando estaba aquí. Purple flowers escuchando a Takiti. Ey. Siempre en mi mente cuando piense en ti. Hablándome en otro idioma, sí, baby. Ey. 사랑한다고
Well, the Olympus Bolts have obviously picked up the pieces from earlier on in the weekend and figured it out, at least here in game number 1, because at moments, this one was difficult to watch. The Olympus Bolts were running over the Solar Scarabs quite literally all over the map. Doug had a hell of a time keeping up with everything that was going on. You're cutting from solo lane into the jungle, mid lane, solo kill for Barracuda, then over on left. This is just an onslaught from the Olympus Bolts. Stretches out a little bit. Solar Scarabs, Trilly, able to find, it was 3 for 1 maybe, giving themselves, limiting how much the Bolts can really get. But it felt like that's all it was. We were stemming, bleeding a bit. We were limiting how much the Bolts could get if you're the Solar Scarabs. Ultimately, that Bolts composition too commanding, and they'll take game 1.
Yeah, I think I think it could have been closer for sure, but I'm gonna draft it up to maybe the Scarabs just weren't prepared with the style of draft that the Bolts came out with. Ven on
Right.
this Pele mid starts the Bluestone, make sure that hey, if Veronica is ever trying to get out with stealth, like I'm always going to make sure there's no way the Morgan cannot exist in this lane. So Veronica never really got these clutch transformations up because he was usually the first target in these fights. Barra gets out to a 3-0 star, which is just massive for your ADC, especially when it's a Freya who is trying to get to late game as quickly as possible. That's pretty much exactly how you'd want your Freya to start off, 3-0. Lasbra just running around the map on this Rats Oscar, finding so many last hits in this fight as well. And then Baskin didn't get those last hits, but what he did do was these late game fights where you think, oh, Baskin goes in first, so maybe we can kill him, and then he would just keep living on 1
Right.
HP, get those silences off, and just doing so much. It was just, as you said, it was kind of an onslaught. If you keep getting 1 kill, trading 1 for 2, this is sort of how it turns out.
A ridiculous game for Ven, who was on Pele mid. Did we pitch that one? I don't think we pitched Pele
No,
mid.
I even pitched Pele solo before Pele mid, so
Right.
that's on me.
Well, look, Assassins all over the map could be the name of the game and should be on the minds of the Solar Scarabs now because 10, 5, and 8 for Ven on Pele mid, 8, 3, and 8 for Lasbra on the other Assassin in this one. And then really nice KDAs across the board for the Bolts. Good support performance from Awesome Jake. Really forgettable, and I think it needs to be for the Solar Scarabs. Those KDAs not attractive after this game. Sometimes that's easier to deal with, though. As a team, you're like, look, we were just not prepared for this. This is just such a lopsided game. Not necessarily a shot call here or there that went wrong. That's just, they got us in game number 1, And so if you're the Solar Scarabs, I think it's about finding your footing. A lot of teams still early on in Phase 3 trying to figure out the meta, right? Figure out what works for them. Some teams have been a bit quicker in figuring it out for themselves. The Olympus Bolts clearly got something good going after game number 1. Solar Scarabs back to the drawing board here to try to push us onto our first game 3 of the phase and of the weekend. And they'll be in the first pick slot in order to do so. Liked the support bans the Solar Scarabs have over the course of this week. And remember the Olympus Bolts healing mitigation mindset as far as their bans. Guan Yu, E-Set, one of their bans as well, and then Umoja also taken away. Looks very similar, though, for the Scarabs here, Trilly. The Daji, of course, for Lasbra, very threatening. Ymir for Awesome Jake, a really good look as well. Some sort of individual pieces rather than an overall mindset being banned away.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if the overall headspace that the Scarabs are in was, okay, that was a bad one. Let's just forget that. We're not gonna go too much into target bans from what we just witnessed. Maybe 1 or 2 here at the end. But besides that, let's just focus on playing a different brand of Smite for game number 2 because that was not something we want waste our brain power thinking too much about in the first pick slot. Again, I still think getting Bronick on something that gets pressure should be the name of the game. The Morgan, she's all well and good, but up against the Pele, I think that was a pretty rough matchup for Bronick. So that
It's tough.
AMC could be open here, and it looks like actually banning away the Morgan. So Bronick will not be able to go back onto that. Try and get something that gets pressure in lane, something that can get some farm, and more specifically, farm quickly, get to late game early. I think that's the name of the game for the Scarabs, and that's if I'm on that in these comms right now, that's what I'm trying to draft.
Yeah, Pele for Ven ran over the Morgan. 1-7-5 for Bronick in game number 1. Need to flip that around here to have a shot in game 2. Hades ends up being first picked for the Solar Scarabs. Have seen it in solo pretty consistently. Of course, you have to talk about flex potential. Could be mid. I'd like to think nowhere else, likely just solo or mid, but we've seen some weird metas forming already here in Phase 3. Hades is a great plug-and-play. It has seen so much overwhelming success. If this does end up being Hades solo for Scary D, I think it puts some onus on that side of the map to really perform here and be one of the pillars for the Solar Scarabs in their victory.
I like what you did there, first of all.
Appreciate you.
Second of all, I do think that just getting a character like Hades that automatically is going to get pressure does make Sam for Soccer's job a lot easier because, you can look at the map, say, hey, they're finding ganks over in duo, they're finding ganks over in mid. Well, I know that Scary D is going to be out clearing, going to be able to get his blue buff consistently, so either A, I can alleviate some of that pressure and go help out elsewhere, or B, I'm just going to camp this Hades as hard as possible, get as much farm as I can from this lead, and that sort of play style. So I think it just makes Sam's job a lot easier having a high pressure god like Hades, not only taking it away from Baskin, but also giving it to the squad. Pele and Freya, I wouldn't doubt that the Bolts are just down for the full run back, so if they are allowed to just keep picking the same exact picks from last game except for that Hades, I wouldn't be surprised if they go towards that.
Yeah, Bolt's feeling just fine with the first 2 that they've gotten. Pele has not lost yet this phase, 3-0. On the Pele. Seen it in the jungle a couple of times.
2 rolls.
2 rolls, that's right. 2 rolls, 3 wins. Bolt's looking to make it 4 here against the Solar Scarabs in game number 2. As mentioned, bans largely the same, except ESET was banned out in game 1 by the Bolts. The Morgan takes that spot here in game 2. So if that's a threat that the Solar Scarabs feel like got mitigated by the Bolts throughout the ban column, might be something they're considering here, depending on what roles still end up needing to be filled. I wonder now if you're Baronic, you're really starting to think about what can you play, because you have to be considerate of the threat that a Pele brings for Ven in the mid lane.
For sure.
The dash in, the assassin play style. What do you pick against that? Got to be on the mind of Baronic.
Feel the weight of the world.
End up being Naja and Atlas, so plenty of lockdown early in the draft for the Scarabs.
I do like the Naja pick here, and you know what? I like the Atlas as well. I certainly wouldn't have minded an ESET grab for mid, not only because it would be great follow-up to the Windfire Wheels and Naja Ultimate, but also I think it's got a decent matchup into Pele. It's not great, no one wants to 1v1 a Pele, but if you do, you've got the knock-up immunity in Wind Gust, and you can also just drop Circle Protection and say, hey, I'm going to wait out, I don't want you anywhere near me for this time being, so if you are aggressed upon, not going to be the worst case, but it looks like just saving that mid lane pick for later on, going to grab the Naja, or maybe Moronic just saying, hey, I'll fight fire with fire, give me Naja mid or something, I'm down to just go that sort of style, but either way, I think a lot of CC here for the Scarabs drafted pretty much immediately. Pillar of Agony is going to get you that bead burn that you want, then makes the Naja's time a lot easier when you're trying to find targets for Windfire Wheels, and of course, Atlas just going with that Gravity Surge, trying to pick up as many as possible and set up for the team.
Yeah, if we're assuming that both Stu and Baronic need their picks here, I wonder if the Bolts, they've already picked their ADC and presumably their mid. But Pele, of course, could go to Lasbra. It's something Lasbra's been really good on in the past. Bolt's an opportunity.
I will not be caught
The
ill-prepared.
Horus won't reveal too much more, but they could just crush another duo ban either over to Baronic or over to Stewart and ban out a couple of those remaining gods. But ESET good, I think, for the Scarabs, but they didn't consider it necessary. Won't grab it in the first 3. Will end up getting banned out by the Olympus Bolts in the second wave of bans. And a Robin's still a threat here. So we've seen some flex picks over the last year, over the year here in Season 9, Trelly, but right now it's kind of all over the map. The Titans have played these triple assassin-style comps. Assassins now flex picks both for mid and for solo and for jungle. I think in a period where teams are trying to figure out what goes where, what's best where. really keeps teams on their toes. You really don't know where this Pele is going to go. You don't know if you need to ban a Raven or Ratatosker. I think a couple of smart bans, though, by the Scarabs.
Yeah, no doubt. I wouldn't be surprised, given the Scarabs draft thus far, if they just grab 2 hunters in this position. They, Boronic has went to these safer hunters in the mid lane. In situations like this, the Charybdis, for example, which hasn't had the greatest performance, but just something that I just want to exist in lane and farm. I have immense safety with the CC immunity in the Whirlpool and the ult with the Maw, so that could be something that they could go to just because they have so much magical damage already. Hades is going to bring in Spades, and then you got Atlas, so that could be something they're looking for, but it's the Bolt's turn to grab, and they are going to pick up the tier.
Now,
go ahead.
Flex potential, Trelly. Flex potential with the tier.
Okay.
You would think solo for sure.
I would think that.
Don't forget Season 7, Awesome Jake, brand spanking new to the league.
Yep.
My man is bringing out tier support like half the time and looking pretty good on it.
That is true.
We have not seen it for a couple of years now. Now, I think Jake really, really good on the Horus, but we've also seen Horus solo lane. I'm just keeping the door open to an Awesome Jake tier support, something we've been deprived of as spectators over the last couple of years. So clearly that's what I'm rooting for, but of course, does that make the most sense to you? You can say no, it's okay.
It doesn't make the most sense to me, but I also really do want to see it because I also have flashbacks of Jake like blinking in, getting double fearlesses in that lane. So if that was
good at it.
If that was something I got to witness here today, I certainly wouldn't be upset. But the Horus just brings so much setup. It also brings a ton of peel for Freya. And when you do pick something like the Freya, you want a fair bit of setup, a fair bit of early damage, and a fair bit of peel. And I think Horus brings that. If you're missing one Fearless, you essentially lose all of those things I just mentioned. So definitely safer to go for the Horus.
Jake doesn't miss, though.
But Jake, not only does he not miss, he doesn't play safe. He doesn't care about those things. So
that's right.
It looks like Thoth will be grabbed here. So Lasber taking the Thoth. No, I'm just kidding. It's probably going to be.
Well, look, you joke, but who knows? You know.
Yeah, it certainly could be an option. But I'm thinking Lasber takes that Pele into the jungle, and now we get to see Ven on a long-range artillery mage, in theory.
Now, if this is the Bolts taking a page out of the Dragon's book, the Game 2 against the Scarabs Dragon's book.
Of course.
It might be Lasbron Thoth just over in mid lane, right? He might just roll swap himself over to mid. That's the least likely, I think, in my opinion.
If we are doing that, I want to see Jake on the tier. Then if that's the case, just give. He wants to play the tier. I don't even have to talk to him. I know looking at him, he wants that tier.
No, I think this is a Bolts team that realizes we need to get this win here. Let's get our Phase 3 back on track after a tough loss earlier on here this weekend. Imagine it'll be Lasber on the Pele. But that's what we talked about a bit with flex potential and how hard it is right now, especially now if Ven did not look good on that Pele jungle, or the Pele mid, then it's a bit more certain that it's Lasber. But because of exactly what Ven just did, the Scarabs have to be considering that it could be right back to that for the Olympus Bolts. Now, one question we did raise is what do Boronic and Stewart end up going to? You figured it might be double Hunter, ends up being Merlin and Cupid. How about the carry duo for the Scarabs to finish off their draft?
Well, I love the Cupid. That's something that I'm never gonna be upset about.
Well, you have to.
When I see,
you have to love Cupid.
That's
just the rule, right?
If he shot me, then yeah. But when I see Naja, I want to see overwhelming burst at the bottom of that ultimate. Merlin doesn't really bring that until 20+ minutes, and even then, it's more so the slow burn instead of the big, like the Scylla ultimate, the Cuckoo ultimate, that sort of thing. So, not my favorite here with the Merlin, but Merlin's kind of the jack of all trades. He does a lot of things decently. So at that point, it's never going to be a bad pick. It's just I feel like there was better options, but the Solar Scarabs want to go what they're used to. Bronic's got a good Merlin. He knows he can pilot it just fine, and I think that's the play style here.
But ultimately, one thing we were a bit concerned about, though, with Boronic was the ability to just stay safe in that lane. Now, we're assuming it's not going to be an assassin for Venigan, but Thoth brings decent range into that lane. You can poke out the Merlin. How about Boronic's safety here going into Game 2?
Merlin never has the best safety. If you get that flicker down, he's sort of in trouble. Thoth has incredible range, and Lasber can use Blink and then the ult to close gaps. So it's not going to be easy, but he's got to stand in that tower line.
Well, look, the Bolts looking to get their phase back on track. The Scarabs trying to avoid an 0-2 start into game number 2 between the Bolts and the Scarabs. We go.
Now, I'm excited for this one, maybe even a little bit more than the first one, although mainly because the first one was exciting to see what the Scarabs had to offer. Now it's time to see what they can do in a bounce-back scenario. Also to see if maybe, fingers crossed, we can get that Jake tier? Probably not is what I'm thinking, mainly because Baskin exists on the team. And to today's credit, there has been a lot of solo Horus for this team. But Baskin hasn't been playing a whole lot,
Yeah,
and
is
I
solo
don't know
Horus
that he
like
is
a
yet to be
Haddix
somebody.
thing, or is it a Bolts
Is it a
thing?
Bolts thing?
I'm thinking it's a Haddix thing.
It might be a Haddix thing. Keep your eye on the Leviathans, because they might have solo Horus.
Well,
in
they
the
definitely
pocket.
have solo Haddix.
They definitely have solo Haddix. But they might have
100%.
solo Horus
Well, yeah,
in the pocket.
because it's a Haddix thing.
But was it a Haddix thing or a Bolts thing?
Well, it's clearly not a Bolts thing because Jake's playing the Horus.
Well, what if Baskin gets really good at Horus?
Yeah. It just feels like there's like a lot of
Yeah,
other picks that you'd probably want to get
Also,
good at first.
I think I've talked to Barra about it, and they're not a big fan of the tier supporter. Like, Jake might be. I don't think anybody else on that team is, though. I think it's one of those things that might be funny occasionally if you're, like, super winning. Like, if they get to the end of this phase and they're guaranteed, like, the _1 spot or something, and it doesn't matter if they lose the next set or a single game, maybe we'll see it. I don't think we're going to see it for a while.
Oh, I'm not a. Well, I mean, not much analysis to be done on something that isn't happening, but I'm not the biggest hater of tier support. I feel like that god has got some pretty decent value
Yeah.
there, especially in like this aggressive support meta, where you can just get the scepter. You're already dealing pretty decent damage. Sustain already exists. Yeah, I might just straight up like it, but I also like Hercules and Fenrir support.
That's a
so,
good point.
You know, I'm a weirdo like that.
Yeah, it is. I will say that's on me. It's very weird to ask you a question about something that's not actively in the game. Instead, it is tier way over there. Dual lane, the Banish, a little short to pick up Hardcore. It is going to be a little bit of a balancing board. At this point, we had already had first blood in game number 1, so already blanket statement better for the Scarabs as far as things are going. It's the Thoth in mid, but now specifically since we're hanging in duo, Horus here instead of the Atlas for Jake. Good stun, much like that. It doesn't feel like the damage potential is anywhere near as high as it was for some reason last game.
Yeah, last game it was because Yorkor was tanking the wave plus
Good point.
Freya 2-1 combo. This time there was enough pressure from the Solar Scarabs that Barracuda felt like leveling the whoop at level 2. Once we get a Radiate and Pulse, that's where the Freya damage started coming through, which is why we see Yorkor throwing around his wave so early in this lane.
Immediately there, taking some minions. Again, not a first blood potential just yet. And with Cupid healing, while it might not be massive this early in the game, it's still going to be something to keep you going alive. Scepter might matter very heavily over there, just in terms of who's going to be able to get it. It is going to be the Scarabs. And so that's a little bit of lane pressure, zapping the minions. Lower damage at this point in the game than it does as it scales up every 3 minutes. It still feels pretty solid. I also want to talk to you about mid, I guess a little bit as well, about over here in solo lane. Scary D playing the Hades, Baskin now onto the tier. Feels like something that we've seen a couple of times now this week, but is Tier quote-unquote back? Is he good enough to continue doing this?
Tier's never gone, all right? But he might be gone now, surrounded. Oh, bad sash from Sam, but he's still in a really bad spot. Baskin's, he's got to die.
Bad spot, yeah, there's the silence to break out the Fearless. There's a little bit of healing, but that is not leveled up enough
he's
at
level
this point
5?
to be able to go through. Level 5 has the ult over the wall, gets
Your
out of
core's
there,
dead?
and Barra kills off Hardcore with a little bit of help. They lose the first blood, but can they at least find
No.
something? A little bit of healing and
No.
a Fearless, and Basket's out of there! The Scarabs lose one and still can't double down to find the kill.
Baskin just lives for way too long there. Clears out the wave, ticks to level 5, blink over the wall from San Francisco, and I'm thinking, all right, Tier's just dead. But it's a Tier with beads for some reason. That guy's got CC immunity hard baked into the passive, and he said, no, I want like actually to be gold, and it gets him out alive. But what's even more stifling, not only is it a kill for the Olympus Bolts on the left side of the map, first blood to a Freya, by the way,
Yeah.
but Baskin
Deja vu.
distracted Scary D for so long, I believe he missed 4 minions to the tower there. That's a significant amount of gold and experience, and what Scary D did get was split. He shared it with Sam. That is tough.
Well, I have to wait a second here, Jake. A little bit under aggression, but I do want to take a look back. We got to see the great escape from Baskin. Now I want to see how Barra got this kill. Might have
Hold
to
on.
wait one more second. Baronic, unfortunately, just has not been able to catch a break, and it is not changing anytime soon. Venenu with the shots from across the lane, able to put down the opposing mid laner one more time. And it might not be the last here, as the Bolts Took them a little longer this time, Mifflin, but they're starting to get aggressive again.
Yeah, this Pele might be a perma-ban up against the Olympus Bolts as long as they're playing against the Solar Scarabs, because this has just been so hard to deal with. Barracuda likely will be allowed to just free farm this lane for a good long while. And if Baskin goes to proxy another wave, I mean, can you really fault him for it? It worked out so well last time by narrow margins, incredibly narrow margins. I expect to see the Olympus Bolts probably keep up pressure in mid, continually shut down Baronic. The Desk talked about it briefly, but sure, Merlin's safer, but not safe.
Well, not safe right now. Stewart, ult for ult trade, damage in favor of Barra. If there hadn't been a lurking Atlas in the waters, might have been able to get aggressive. But instead, that's going to fall back. Looks like the Scepter is going to go towards the Scarabs. Maybe positioning for some mid-lane aggression. Barra playing up despite the numbers disadvantage for him. And it feels like now, Mifflin, we can take a look back, see that first blood in action. Specifically for me, because I want to see where Barra is going to be standing. I saw an assist there for Lasbra, an assist there for Jake. And it feels like it's very important. Never mind, we're going to have to wait one more time. Jake wants to
give
go
up on
in.
it.
Yeah, I guess at this point we might have to just leave it behind. Unfortunate.
Unless-
Barra got a kill. Unless, if I keep mentioning it, fights keep happening, so maybe that's what happens here when I mention the first blood one more time and see who's going to decide to get aggressive while we talk about it here. It's a lot of pressure because, like you mentioned, first blood for Freya just feels like it's important. Then you get a second kill on to Thoth. I think it's really important. And so, yeah, we can take a look. Jake, stay where you are sitting right now at this first blood and see exactly what had happened here. And it looks like it might have just been the standard for some of the Scarabs, Mifflin, where it is hardcore just a little too far forward. Name a combo better than Scarab supports and stepping out of position.
I knew you were going to say it, and I was like, no way he says. Bro, how is Bobby catching strays still?
I have to give it credit. That one's actually inspired by Bobby tweeting because people were talking about him during the last Scarab sets, and he said, I don't even have to be playing for the chat to be focused on me.
That is awful.
I'm sorry, man. He's so nice, too. I feel bad about that, actually.
Maybe it's just a Scarab support passive. Happened to Yarkor, too. That's the world champion MVP. Look, the Solar Scarabs are not so far removed from this game that they need to really start allowing fights to happen around them. They can continually show up to these objectives. Experience gold still pretty even considering how poor the pacing of some of these fights have been. My primary concern being that Freya over in the long lane, Barracuda, has been allowed to free farm, solo farm a little bit more consistently than Stewart. We've seen Yarkor present in the lane a lot more than we've seen from Awesome Jake, as well as that first blood. Going to the Freya means that Barracuda's likely primed for a very good laning phase yet again. But a slight difference in the build. Instead of going for that hastened ring in the first slot, instead he's picking up his lifesteal early on. Tells me that Barracuda doesn't really love his odds in the 1v1 up against Stewart.
Yeah.
Cupid just hits real hard, has decent sustain, so the longer the fights go, the more it's a poke battle, the more it's going to favor Stu.
Good survivability as well. Dash gets you out of there. Fields of Love is just a great ultimate, right? I mean, at this rate, like, bar none, he's usually just going to be trading ult for ult with Barra. There's a good example of why the dash can be helpful, though. Backing off. Wondered if Vin was going to let fly that ultimate, but not enough damage or maybe just not enough follow-up afterward to make this worthwhile. Baskin's in the jungle.
What?
And was looking for a little bit. Forces the blink out of Sam without having any damage, any real presence that he was going for. Maybe worried about the Fearless.
Yeah, Baskin's not soloing you. I mean, Manicore Spike, tier powers, it would have been a good amount of damage. I don't think that's like threatening enough that I'd be willing to lose my relic. I'd sooner use the ultimate to escape in that situation. San for Soccer, though, yeah. I'm sure maybe a bit traumatized by how game one had gone.
I was thinking flashbacks to having Baskin locked down near the tier 2, and he still got out of there. And unfortunately for him, Baskin admittedly not necessarily a huge imposing threat just yet, but we haven't seen yet what he's quite capable of. Triple goose eggs for him and for Scary D. Survivability's been the name of the game over here. You mentioned the Manticore Spike, so Prot's online for him as well. Super early on in the game. Meanwhile, it's stacking and reading for Scary D. And for Baronic, and for Hardcore, and for Stewart, all playing the slow game.
Early Cloak of the Ascetic pickup for Awesome Jake, so additional CDR to anyone who's fighting near him. Once that meditation starts to get channeled through, the Olympus Bolts Not so far ahead that I love their odds in a team fight around the Gold Fury, but we're about 20 seconds out from Pyromancer spawning, and they've certainly got the potential to fight around that. Greater Scorpion stripped away by the Solar Scarabs, a bit of global farm over to the Order side, just keeping that lead as controlled as it could be. But the Olympus Bolts just feels like they're on the precipice of closing in on some of their significant power spikes themselves, namely that Spear of Deso for Ven and mid. This guy's really going to start doing a whole lot of damage in some of these poke battles.
Scary D's low. Baskin. I thought he was going to be looking for a little bit more. Ult was available. Cooldowns just weren't treating him well. Glad Shield picked up. We can talk about that maybe a little bit because this is an early Gold Fury. 10 minutes, 15 seconds start up here for the Bolts.
Stu's got him.
And they are taking a lot of damage in the process. They don't think they have enough for it. Half health is when they leash it. And best case scenario for the Scarabs, Stewart's able to walk in there, maybe steal a Fury and get some kills. Neutral case scenario is exactly what happens. Bolts just have to fall back, maybe even force a couple of players to retreat to the base. So some nice TKOs for them, despite the way things have been going around the map.
I mean, I like the idea from the Bulls. They had eyes on 3 Scarabs on the right side of the map with Baskin's aggressive positioning, so why not try your hand at the Gold Fury? Maybe had Ven got there a little bit sooner, like at the start of the objective, might have gone their way, or at least got it low enough that Ven would have had best secure on map, but instead, it will be a reset back to neutral.
There's a toss back. Jake under the tier 1 tower. A lot of damage, actual follow-up. Nice heal dash gets him out of there. And it's going to be the return poke instead from Vin. So what felt like it could have been a kill for the Scarabs, unfortunately falls a little short. That has not slowed down their map play. Invade on the Greater Scorpion you had highlighted. They get their own. Now they're going for the Pyromancer. Vin has ult and the range over the wall, looking for some damage.
Good poke.
It is just the poke enough to get rid of the Scarabs. Keep this game going more at an even rate. Talk about duality when it comes down to the way game 1, the pace that was set, breakneck speed from minute 1 to this. It is definitely a change of pace. And I would argue, Mifflin, it feels like it's favoring the Scarabs ever so slightly.
Well,
I mean,
game's
not in
favoring the Olympus
actuality.
Bolts, but yeah, the difference is absolutely much better for the Solar Scarabs, and I think it's a difference of composition. You don't have that standard diver in the middle of the map. Ven playing the Thoth is more so focused on that late game scaling, the ability to be a part of the team fight. Lazra from the jungle just looking for his opportunities, so who's really going to be the one to originate that pressure? For now, I think the Bolts are just fine with the pacing, because when you look at their comp, late game scaler Barracuda, Freya is about as good as it can get at the 40-minute mark. Thoth, the exact same situation. Lazra starting to hit some significant power spikes as well. Compare it to the late game scaling of the Solar Scarabs, it's a much more standard composition, top to bottom, but you don't exactly have the best follow-up on a Najah ultimate. Cupid's Fields of Love, very strong as of now, but maybe a Heavenly Sprint from the Olympus Bolts might be able to mitigate some of that. I really do like the Bolts odds 25, 30 minutes into the game. So maybe that's just what they're waiting for.
Well, they're getting there. Slowly but surely, 13 minutes in, Pyromancer started up by the Scarabs one more time. This one's looking a little more secure for them. Jake, Lazra coming in. The damage is there. The Bolts take the Pyromancer. And now they've got Scary D. They've got Sam. And Sam uses the ultimate Fearless against the wall. The damage is there for the Bolts. And Lazra kills the opposing jungler. Scary D tries to find something to turn things around. Pillar of Agony pulls into Vin. Just Aegis's through. It's going to be just shy of a stun from Jake, but it doesn't matter. Fearless against the wall is good. Ults find their targets, and it's 3 clean kills so far for the Bolts, plus the Pyro steal. A great fight for the Chaos team.
I think it was a Pyroclast tick. Not actually throwing out Pele's first ability, but just the dot damage afterward that takes the Pyromancer away. The Solar Scarabs have dedicated so many of their resources to the objective that they had nothing left in the tank for the fight. A great rotation for Baskin, finds 2 impactful Fearless, slams the Scarabs into the wall, holds them in place, a whiffed ultimate from Sam for Soccer, and it goes from bad to worse for the Order side. We were talking 700 gold separating these 2 squads. It has ballooned out
Almost
of control.
A 4K.
Yeah, the Olympus Bolts in a very good position. Haven't spent that gold just yet, so maybe an opportunity for the Solar Scarabs to force a fight before the Bolts can get back to base. Barracuda would be a great pick.
Yeah, they're going to try for it. Banish not going to connect there. Barra's getting low, no ult. And decides to keep both relics there. Does not see himself surviving. That's a good kill, finally putting themselves on the board for the Scarabs.
I think you have to make use of this time. This lead has ballooned so quickly that if I'm the Solar Scarab, sure, it's 4 strong on the Olympus Bolts, but Fenn's pretty low, probably has to go back to base. Get to that Gold Fury, try and keep him off center, keep him on the back foot. This is one way to do it. You get a pick on a Jake, that's great.
Jake has to use one of his dashes for a disengage. No ult available. He's just buying time. There's Vin, comes in to make sure to be a savior for him. Lasbra starts a couple of fights, does still have the ult. Baskin looping around as well. Does not seem like it should be any aggression from the Bolts. Everybody's backed off, but if anything, it's just presence to make sure this Fury won't start. And Mifflin, they're successful in that garage. They might be going for a little bit more. Baskin is positioning. You had said chill. He's positioning in an unchill way. He wants something to go down, and it's just trying to find the right target. Vin throwing some damage long range, but they're going to count that as a win, just stopping the Scarabs from doing anything related to the Fury.
Keep your eyes on Lasbra. He's got a great flank here. Solar Scarabs have no idea.
There's going to be the collapse onto Scary D. Pillar of Agony. Those procs, they're nice, but it's not enough to keep you alive. Hardcore, fearless against the wall. A couple more autos is all it takes. Jake with credit for the kill, and it's a 2-for-none trade for the Bolts.
And this was my concern for the Solar Scarabs. Once they find that pick on the Barracuda, you have the onus, and you are absolutely required to make use of that time. 40 seconds while Barracuda was dead, and the Scarabs try and group up. They posture around a red buff. They start poking some damage into Jake. Realizing that Ben's at a quarter HP, Barra's still dead for another 20 seconds. I would have loved to see them just back up to that Gold Fury and either force a fight, which would have been a 5 versus 3 in worst case odds, or just a free objective. Instead, let them reset back to neutral, and neutral looks way better for the Bolts, who are incredibly far ahead. Barracuda forces a whole lot out of Stu there. Takes off the Aegis, takes out the Fields of Love, only in exchange able to strip away that Valkyrie's discretion. So maybe a rotation from Sam could spell some doom for Barracuda. 100 seconds left on his beads. Keep your eyes on this Naja. Sam's been having an uncharacteristically quiet day.
Yeah, a couple of sashes that we've caught on camera, not connecting.
In 4K even.
And yeah, unfortunate for him, but we've gotten all to see it. The Naja, 0-1 and 0. Will highlight level 15 to level 16 for that last engagement. It wasn't a big experience gap, but just 1 point less for Barra going into that, where he was able to find all that damage onto Stu. So that feels like it's pretty helpful for him. Gold Fury. Bolts are standing around it. They're going to start it up a little bit. Barra, Jake, kind of pioneering this one for them. Lasbra making sure to come in. Finn, maybe caught out, has to dash away and is going to be able to get there, but the Heart Bomb is good. The damage is still there from Stewart, but it's not been enough so far. They finally lock him down. Now Scary D comes in. Pillar of Agony forces the Aegis, and they get the kill. It's a double for Hardcore of all people. Baskin locked down, locked away, and slowly whittled. And unfortunately for the Bolts, the Fury call is not the play. 3 for none, and maybe a little bit more if Sam can close this gap onto Lasbra.
Bolts just incredibly separated in that engagement. Baskin had a good flank, connects with Baronic, strips the beads from the offset of the fight, but it's the Solar Scarabs who W-key their way in to the 4-man core, 3-man rather, of the Olympus Bolts. Take the team fight and take the objective on the tail end and keep this game interesting, a battle of swings between these two teams, 4,000 one way and then immediately back the other, and right back to even 18 minutes in. But taking a peek at some of the experience deficits where they lie, they are significant. 3 levels in the jungle between Lasbra and Sam still. It's reflected elsewhere. Yarkor has 2 on Awesome Jake. So at the end of the day, although it is even, individual matchups still at a bit of a disparity.
We have to keep our eyes on the Pele throughout this game, and the Naja, but for different reasons, right? Naja to see what exactly Sam's going to be able to offer for the table, 0-1 and 0 as of right now. And the Pele, 2-0 and 5. Lasber's been very active, 100% kill participation so far. But it is slowly slipping through the Bolts' hands. 7-1 kill lead turned to 7-4. And like you said, in the matter, like the blink of an eye, almost literally, the gold lead completely shifts. Jake just caught out in the jungle. Nothing else you can say about it. And that is an easy kill for the Scarabs. And they're now starting to push 2K for their lead. For the first time, it feels like, really, this set.
Maybe have an opportunity to push into this tier 1 mid tower as well. 30 seconds, 20 rather, on Awesome Jake's respawn, who's just positioned a bit too aggressively there. Probably doesn't realize that Stu is hovering nearby, but it's not a tier 1 that the Solar Scarabs have got their eyes set on. Instead, Fire Giant pulled out. Easier said than done with Baskin nearby.
Yeah, not a lot of damage to burn this thing down. Fire Giant sitting finally at 1/2 HP. Hardcore still tanking it. Holding on to it, trying to see what bolts they can catch out. Vin seems to be the target. There's going to be the shot for the judgment, but it's not going to do enough damage, and he's not going to have enough survivability. Baskin goes into the back, but is unable to get the Fearless he wanted. Instead, it's a burn down. The Scarabs are finally finding their footing, and they're getting a lot, but it's not enough. It's a 2-man kill for Lasbra as he just comes in, turns it around, make it 3 as he gets rid of Hardcore. Finally, Scary D is able to get rid of the jungler. 3 for 3, and a full-on deicide with a double kill from Baronic, but the Scarabs bite off more than they can shoot.
Lasbra comes up massive for his team, creates so much space, but Barracuda steps too far forward, walks into the range of Scary D, and gets shut down from 100% to 10% in the blink of an eye. Falls down immediately afterward. I believe only shoots off like 4 auto attacks in that entire engagement. Had Barra spaced that one out a little bit better, I think Lasbra had done enough for his team to win that entire engagement. The Solar Scarabs, though, are the ones that win at the end of the day. Tier 1 tower on right feels pretty good. Baronic able to strip away a purple buff and a couple of waves for himself too. And now all the leads starting to belong to the Solar Scarabs. The only one struggling, Sam for Soccer, still in that jungle, but his job is clear from here, and the changes to Naja recently should facilitate the style shift I expect from him. Become that initiator. Go in with the ultimate, go in with the sash, create space. Even if you're not taking people up to the air, you're still getting 50 procs both ways. Once you got that ability, the Windfire wheels maxed out. With the Manicore spike already finished up, wouldn't be surprised if Stanford Soccer just shifts his attention. It's just a tank style of build.
And you got to talk about an 8K gold swing from 4K in the lead for the Bolts now to 4K in the lead on the other side in the matter of 5 total minutes, maybe less, before that entirety to take effect. Well played by the Scarabs again, maybe a little more than they wanted during the last one, but they still get the deicide and keep 2 alive. Kills now read 10-10, what was a 7-1 lead. So that is now 9-3 in favor of the Scarabs in terms of team fights. 5-1 and 5 for Lasbury. You mentioned it, big plays. Does not look that even if it's not for the jungler on the Bolts. Vin has been caught out. Barra unable to get damage out there. And you got to see that reflected over there in the player charts. 8,500 there for Thoth, 9,700 for Barra, with 3 Scarabs sitting above both carries on the side of the Bolts. It's feeling very comfortable, I think, if you're a Scarabs fan, but you've got to be able to do something with it. This is where we've seen them falter in the past.
It is, but we've got different shot callers and different players nowadays for the Solar Scarabs, so maybe some different differences in the late game. But the concern was earlier that the Olympus Bolts composition scales incredibly well into the late game. You're slightly behind now, but your draft still does have that late game strong suit. Once Ven's allowed to poke damage from range a little bit more consistently, because what happens to him in the previous fight? I don't know what happened. I just saw him get walked down. It was W key for 4 from the Solar Scarabs with no response from Ven. Relics were not available. But let's put Basket between Ven and the enemies. Let's put Jake between Ven and the enemies. And all of a sudden this Thoth is doing a whole lot of damage. Obshard finished up. Get Barracuda a little bit more space in some of these team fights, or rotate him in a little bit sooner, and he falls up on the massive DPS that we've seen output from Lasbra. I think the Olympus Bolts have still got a bit left in the tank. We haven't quite seen the full strength of their composition in a 5-on-5.
We're going to have to see what their shot calling is going to look like here. Fury started up, taking down 3 Scarabs on left, 2 in mid. What do the Bolts do with that opportunity, if anything? The answer seems to be nothing. Pyromancer going to be respawning here in a couple of seconds, so maybe just grouping up for that. And Mifflin, that last engagement living in my mind. Baskin gets a great ult between, or at least behind, where Vin dies. Lands right
Double
around
push.
there, finds a really good Fearless, just like right now, 2-man for him here. And what looked like, at least in that engagement, could have been a 4-5-man Fearless, a phenomenal play. Does not happen for him, forced to turn around, the silence is too strong, and he has to run away. Luckily for the Bolts, they're finding small scraps that are still going in their favor. Pyromancer gets picked up this time around. Keeps things within that 4,000 mark, still favoring the Scarabs. And what a hell of a turnaround from the way this game, I guess, kind of ballooned out of the way. Yeah, in game number 1 for the Bolts. Now the Scarabs able to fight back, really kind of showcase what they have to offer.
This is a spooky situation for the Solar Scarabs. They do not have the superior confirmation. No eyes on Ven as of now. They need to be aware that that steal could happen.
Bear seems to be the target. It's going to be a little bit of CC onto him. The damage is good. Pillar of Agony is out, and that's Bear up into the sky. Beads already used. Aegis, the last remaining relic for him. Thoth trying to throw some damage in there for the Gary to keep him alive, but up into the sky.
He lives those.
He goes with Sam. He lands, and he's good, but Scaredy is able to find the final hit. So far, 1 for 2. Baronic already gone on the Scarabs, and they're trying to find a little bit more. Pick up onto Jake, and they make it 2 for 2 in the trade so far. Sam, stranded in no man's land, goes for the sash. And that is enough now to keep it 3 and 3 on each side. Neither going to be able to take a massive advantage.
Man, Lasbra has a precision scalpel this game, just removing these problem targets from the Solar Scarabs. He goes in, and Baronic was not even allowed to think about using his relics. Both Beads and Aegis maintained, but not his life. Lasbra able to take him out. Ven given a little bit of space as well, puts out a whole lot of damage. Scary D tries his best to close gap and make sure that Thoth wasn't allowed to free cast, was just shy of landing the Pillars of Agony. From there, the Olympus Bolts have to scatter. 2 for 2 trade. But with the ADC taken out on the side of the Bolts, there's no way they could have fallen back to the objective. Stu, on the other hand, might need to be the eye of the Olympus Bolts here. Lazarus done a great job of making sure Baronic hasn't been allowed to play, but Stu has been doing a whole lot of damage in these engagements. Maybe he's got a target on his back now.
Definitely someone, pretty much everybody on this side, but Stu for sure.
No relics
ideal
either.
target. Yeah, no relics. Lasbra has been a scalpel as you describe him. Feels like a really good opportunity, maybe for the Lasbra, for the Pele to get back there. Maybe cause some trouble for this keep it. 3-1 and 5, top of the damage charts. So far has been able to create a lot of space. Fields of Love back available. This Fire Giant, it feels like this has been the goal, the target, the dance that we've been seeing. A Trebuchet's pushing down on left for the Bolts. With the gold Mifflin. Still in favor of the Scarabs, dwindling though, as these fights are going a little more even. 2,400 now, as opposed
Losing
to the 4K
value
that
as
it
well.
was. Yeah, I mean, the closer and closer we get to 30 minutes, the more it becomes anybody's fight. Map state's the exact same. 3 tier 2s standing on either side. Trebuchets fighting each other over there and left now. It is definitely going to be a fun battle to watch. Whenever one of these
between
teams
the
goes for it.
Trebuchets?
Well, no, I was thinking but around the Fire Giant.
Yeah, I agree.
And I was going to ask, who do you think goes first? I mean, the Scarabs have been pulling it. Do you think they go for it, or do you think that they're going to wait for the Bolts to maybe make a misstep?
Yeah, if the Solar Scarabs are going to wait for the Bolts to do it, they're going to be waiting a whole long time.
Good point.
I think. Sure, the Olympus Bolts have got decent DPS. They've got the ability to tank the objective with sustain, but the lead still does belong to the Solar Scarabs, and the Bolts are not a team that are just going to walk in 3K down.
They're in a good position here, the Scarabs are. Start the Fire Giant,
going
half
quick.
health already. This is getting burned down. Vin, Barra in the neighborhood. Sam goes
Got
straight
him.
for the back line and is able to find
Got the
Vin,
dash.
take him up into the air as well, and catches him in the wrong spot. Vin goes down, and it's a fight looking great for the Scarabs. They get rid of Lasbra as well, 3v5. And the Scarabs come out mostly unscathed.
Sanford Soccer does a lot for his team and has a lot to give still, but a double push from Baskin lines up on 2. Scary D incredibly low. Can he make it out? He's doing so much damage.
And not only that, the Pillar of Agony gives him the procs. He's able to pick up one onto Jake and a second onto Barra. A double kill for Scary D. And let's just add one more to the team. A triple kill and the deicide. The Scarabs turn this game around, and they've got timers on their side. Mifflin, 20 seconds until Vin comes back. They're pushing the tower. They're at least going to go for the Phoenix, but they might just end this game marching forward slowly. It's taken a little longer than they'd like. 9 seconds on Vin, 10 on Lasbra. Feels like it could be risky.
40 seconds on Baskin, 30 on Barra. Ven's up, as is Laz. Both ultimates should be available, but the Solar Scarabs want to end this one.
Yeah, there's the charge, there's the shot. Stewart eats the brunt of that damage. Vin has a target in mind, so does Lasbra. But Lasbra, he's unable to get it. The shot's still good from the mid laner, the Titan, not taking enough damage, and they've got Jake back for the CC. Baronic is gone. Stewart is TKO'd and forced out of the fight. Vin is
free-casting.
dashing forward aggressively, looking for this clapback. It's still a 4v2. You still have to play carefully if you're the Bolts. This Phoenix does not exist. They're going to let the Scarabs get away with this one. They don't get the end. They still get a bird, still have the deicide, still have the lead.
Ben's freaking me out with these aggressive dashes. No beads for another 2 minutes. Means that Sanford Soccer with a sash could really put him in a bad position. But a phenomenal defense from the Olympus Bullets. Lasbra understood his assignment perfectly. Go in, create space, does exactly that. Then outpours damage throughout the entirety of that small skirmish. Now it's the Olympus Bullets hunting through the jungle. If the Solar Scarabs stick around too long, they could lose their lives. 3 members of the Bolts step on a ward. Sanford Soccer should be aware that they're nearby.
Yeah, definitely playing it like someone who knows what's up and make sure that he's not going to be in danger. Map state's only shifted. Not only the Phoenix on right, Tier 2 on left falls for the Bolts. A little more gold going in the pockets of the Scarabs. What was slowly dwindling has now once again ballooned back in their favor. 8,800 gold. And there's still more on the map. Gold Fury recently re-added to the pool of Furies that could go after 20 minutes, right? So feels good to be able to pick it up and a little bit more.
Can you pronounce the buff it gives? I can't pronounce it.
I know. I
almost said Euclidean, but I was like, that's not right.
That's like geometry, isn't it?
I don't know. Some sort of curve, I guess.
Either way, feels good to have it here. 30 minutes in. I actually thought the Scarabs were going to go for it. I guess a minute and a half on a Fire Giant buff. It's much smarter to try and use that elsewhere. They're going to put their focus in mid. Jake's in the air, and he's bringing some people with him. Barra and Baskin leading the way up against Scary D. The damage is there. Look at these autos from Barra. They're tearing through Scary D's health bar, and they're looking for that last hit. There's the kill onto one, a shutdown onto Scary. They're losing the Phoenix on the other side, but Scary and Sam, Scary dead. Sam able to survive through this one, has a little bit of a heal. Pele alone.
Pincer.
Around side this, they're going to isolate them, lock them down, looking for the Phoenix, or looking for instead the Fearless, and they're gonna find a double kill for Baskin as it's clean for him. A great pickup, and it's 4 down. Hardcore last one standing, trying to get a turnaround kill, but no, it's Baskin with the saves one more time, and now Mifflin timers favoring the Bolts. They're gonna start running down, but where do they go? I mean, nowhere for them is safe. 2 waves of fire minions going towards their base. What can they get?
They can get a tier 2.
Can they get a Phoenix?
They might get a Phoenix. That's a hard one. 10 seconds left on Scary D's respawn. You don't have a Hunter. Yeah, what's he hitting the tower for? Like, I don't know, like 30, 40 per auto? This is going to be slow play from the Olympus Bulls.
No.
I think you take the tier 2, you back up, you maybe grab the Gold Fury on the way out. You're at least able to get that right side Phoenix back. Could have some time for it to regen some HP as well. Phenomenal fight to the Olympus Bolts. The Solar Scarabs split on the map. But at the end of the day, the base is broken. Left side Phoenix was taken by the Solar Scarabs, so that Titan will not be regenerating any HP, and that is the most valuable Phoenix in the map. The one furthest away from the Fire Giant means the next Fire Giant dance should favor the Solar Scarabs as well, but it just feels like the Scarabs are missing one little X factor that could just close out this game. And I think that X factor's gotta be Sanford Soccer. If he's connecting impact ultimates onto Ven or Barracuda, it just simplifies this game so much for the Scarabs.
I mean, the ones we've seen connect have made massive
They
differences.
win the fight after.
Yeah, 1, 3, and 10. Those 10 have been very, very crucial for their team. 7, 4, and 9 there for Scary D. He has been monumental in follow-up for Sam's damage. We'll see whether or not they're going to be able to find anything. Fire Giant respawning here in just a few seconds. The Scarabs have the positioning around the pit. At this point, do you go for picks? Or if you're Sam, are you looking for like a blink over the wall onto Vin, or are you playing this for the team fight? You're hunting Barra.
Yeah, Barra no beads. Barra got no chance as so long as Sanford Soccer can aim that ultimate properly. He needs to follow up though. Needs his solo laner. Scary D, take it off the map.
And now it's a dash forward, aggressive from Vin. They're looking for Boronic. They've got the damage. There's Fields of Love. Jake goes forward. Jake looking for the CC. Does not have it.
He's not.
It does not have the damage, but it is a 2-for-1 trade so far. Still
Stu got
in favor of it. And Stu is going big. He's able to find 2 on the carries, and Sam keeps things going. Lasbra forced to fall back. Resurging forward.
Sam has Blink.
Sam has Blink. Stewart has damage. Hardcore has CC. That's exactly what they need. There's the Blink. There's the
turn.
Sash. There's the turn. It's almost enough damage from Lasbra. But Stewart stays alive and keeps things going.
Baskin healthy and has enough damage that Stewart can't just walk in for free. Does at least have the help of Yarkor. Won't be easy for Baskin. Has to let this Phoenix go to defend his base. Titan taking a whole lot of damage from minions. 20 seconds left on nearest respawn. What's the Solar Scarabs' decision? I think they could have been capable of moving in for the end there. Would have been accused of panic ending. Sure, chat's typing it right now. So instead, the Solar Scarabs take the more, I suppose, even keel approach. Fall back, look at the Fire Giant, do it all over again. Map state still favoring him. Baskin rotating, won't let the FG go down, but that left side Phoenix has already got minions on it.
Yeah, that's going to be dangerous territory for him. Jake leaving the base. There's going to be Bera and maybe Vin? No, just Bera going for the defense. Baskin is here. He has a target in mind, and it is Stewart, half health already. But Baskin burned by the carry, and they're going to take him
Jake's
down.
here.
A clean kill. Jake is here. Jake is up. Jake
What's up?
has the same target in mind. Knocked up by the FG. They're going for Stewart. They want the burn, but the Scarabs just have too much in retaliation. Jake pays for the aggression and is killed off. Vin, he's hung out to dry by his team. Now the Scarabs, if you're looking for an end, you've got fire minions over there, but Lasper keeps coming in and making single target plays. And he's able to get a kill, but fire minions, Mifflin, they've got a Merlin, they've got a Hades. Is it enough here? Especially with Atlas trying to stop the back. If he can keep Lasper engaged,
He can.
that's going to keep it open. Bera, the only line of defense here. Lasper might be able to get a kill onto Hardcore, but it still leaves the problem in the base.
Gotta
How
bake it
much time do they
fast.
have? Bera's gonna try for something. He goes up in the air. The damage, only 1, 2, 3 shots connecting, but it's not a kill.
That's
onto
it.
Baronic. Baronic walks in, and the Scarabs are turning this one around. They get
Lasper's
this title.
back?
Lasper,
The hero?
He's gonna come in. He's got the
No
damage
way.
minions. They have to do something. Finally, it ends. Sweaty and close. Oh, but the Scarabs are able to take it.
Man, Lasper looking like Mr. Olympia out there, just dragging his team through every single one of these engagements. Unfortunately for him, the Olympus Bolts could not quite make use of his valiant efforts, and the Solar Scarabs will take us a 3 as they are apt to do. What an impressive and just entertaining match. The Solar Scarabs, ever the showmans, just regardless of who's playing under their banner, this team always is keeping it just the most fancy version of Smite we could watch. That is just too much fun.
Keeping it entertaining. Look, 4K down at one point, find a wipe against the Bolts,
Crazy.
then eventually turn themselves to 4K up in their favor and start to lose their lead. It
4K
just
lost,
goes all
then
the way
8K swings.
Yeah, it's just so much back and forth. An exciting Smite that goes between these two teams. I have no idea what to expect out of Game 3. We've gotten a little bit of every pace of game that you can imagine here. But you have to think Lasper's feeling pretty good despite the loss because of how he looked. Vin, Bera maybe not going back to either the Freya or the Thoth. Freya's hitting hard, but it felt like it was easy to dive on him. There's not enough for us to do to speculate here. Instead, we're just going to kick it to a quick break, and when we get back, we'll have Game 3.
Water. Earth. Fire. Momo?
Dime si te acuerdas cuando estaba aquí. Purple flowers, escuchando a Takiti. Ey, siempre en mi mente cuando piense en ti. Hablándome en otro idioma, sí, baby. Ey, sarahanda mare yo, sarahanda mare yo. Dímelo lento, baby, más lento. Sarahanda mare yo. 사랑한다고 말해줘. Keep me up when I give me 아마 수처럼 나잖아. We can take it slow. Banging on the despacito flow. 반에서 처음 봐서 baby 혼자 있어 yeah. 시간 있어 여기 나가 술 좀 마시자. 밖에 놀아라면 먹자 아직 집에 가지 마. You could tell me anything. 요즘 너만 생각해. 보고 너무 뭔가 봐. 답이 계속 나는 up. All the time 들어봐. You and I 늦었지만 better not than never baby alright. 반응해 on my mind 말해줘. Do or die 문제라면 baby know I got the answers tonight yeah. Dime si te acuerdas cuando estaba aquí. Purple flowers, escuchando a Takiti. Ey, siempre en mi mente cuando piense en ti. Hablándome en otro cuentas contigo. Purple flowers, baby, you know what I need. Flores, flores morado. Flores, flores morado, baby. Dime si te acuerdas cuando estaba aquí. Purple flowers, escuchando a Takiti. Ey. Siempre en mi mente cuando piense en ti. Hablándome en otro idioma, sí, baby. Ey. 사랑한다고 말해줘. 사랑한다고 말해줘. dímelo lento, baby, más lento. 사랑한다고 말해줘. 사랑한다고 말해줘. 사랑한다고 말해줘. dímelo lento, baby, más lento. 사랑한다고 말해줘. Yeah.
We gon' break up, then we make up. Act like we're gonna be friends. Flames the fire, take me higher. Leave it all over again, all over again. Leave it all over again, all over again. Leave it all over again. We gon' break up, then we make up. Act like we're gonna be friends. Blaze the fire, take me higher. Leave it all over again, all over again. Leave it all over again, all over again. Leave it all over again, again, again. Leave it all over again.
Now that was spooky to start off this spooky season here. Spooky for the Bolts as well. We're going on to a game 3 thanks to the Solar Scarabs. What a drama-filled game we had here in game 2 between the Bolts and the Scarabs. This is one I'm sure both fans of both teams figured their team had the win at different points throughout this game. Scarabs are up big, Bolts are up big. Eventually it comes down to death timers, Lasbra's getting picks. Nothing guaranteed here in game 2 between the Bolts and the Scarabs. Good news for Scarabs fans, though. First win of the phase up against the Bolts, and on to a game 3 we go here, Trelly. I think bright spots for both squads. There are moments where you're like, surely the Scarabs end here, and Lasbra finds a way to get a pick on this Pele. I mean, such an entertaining back-and-forth game.
Oh, yeah.
The type of game, though, that only Solar Scarabs fans are going to be feeling happy about. The Bolts are like, yeah, it was entertaining, but we lost. Like, you want a back-and-forth game where you win. It's exactly what happens here for the Scarabs.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, that was a game, as you said, where it could have went either way. There was a times where I was just like, okay, we're all set up for a Bolts win here, and then the Scarabs just answer back in a huge way. I got to give props to Scary D. I mean, this Hades pick was going huge. It's been going huge for pretty much whatever team is able to get it, so I would not be surprised if the Hades is not allowed to exist again. But even at the end there, where Scary D sort of got picked before the fight even started, Sampler Soccer was going huge. He had like 1 kill and 10 assists at one point, but whenever he was able to find those ults, as Gore said on the cast, they were able to capitalize on them. It just seemed like a ton of CC. They were able to completely disrupt the backline.
Sustained? Oh my god.
It seemed like,
Look at this.
This is when the Bancroft's Claw Pox were going huge. Remember J-Max saying, Claw, Claw, like the whole time in that fight, because Scary D just would not die. This was the triple kill, I believe, where he just popped off.
Yep.
And that's where I was really like, oh, this is the Scarabs game for sure. Like at this moment
Right.
here, I was like, this is it.
A little more drama after that moment,
Oh, yeah.
but the momentum really shifted for the Solar Scarabs in that play there for Scary D. The sustain was just so strong, and you're right, the 1-2 punch between Sam Soccer and Scary D, Windfire Wheels, Sashes, into Pillars of Agony, so often landing on Ven and Bera. Stu deserves the shout-outs, though, here as well. The Cupid really turned it on later in the game. So important to trade out with Lasbra there in moments like that, and Stu goes 7-3 and 10. So Scary D, bright spot for the Solar Scarabs here. Stewart as well. Lasbra felt like dragging the team forward there at 11-4 and 9 out of the jungle. Laz, a fantastic performance put together. And really, Trelly, Ven and Bera just had such a hard time staying alive. I think the casters accurately shout out that Lasbra pinpoint accuracy on the Pele, deleting the carries. I think Sam and Scary D had just as good a time dropping down Ven and Bera throughout the course of this game. And so we've had a little bit of everything in this set so far. Olympus Bolt's pretty convincing there in game number 1. Solar Scarabs a bit shaky, but still grabbed themselves a win now in game 2. I'm trying to figure out strategy-wise where you even really go from this point, because the Bolts had their game plan and it worked perfectly in game 1.
Yep.
The Solar Scarabs, that 1-2 punch with the Hades and the Naja Trellies, maybe the starting point now for the Bolts. Maybe even just first pick. If you're first pick, you're hoping the Hades gets let through.
Yep.
On the flip side, maybe you're taking it away.
Yeah, I would say if you're first pick, you're leaving open that Hades and vice versa, not letting the other team get it. But I also think that, Ven did a lot of damage on the Thoth, but in a composition like this where you have Horus as your linear engage, if Basket blinks and hits a big fearless, that's one thing. But Horus is trying to set up the team. That's your one peel tool as well. When your Horus is gone, Ven's in the back line as a Thoth.
Yep.
And there's no real peel there at that point. So it's a difficult time to be a Thoth in the backline when your engage is like 2 blink warriors. So I think just a rough team comp all around. It could have worked from ahead, but because it didn't, we saw Lasbro's like, don't worry, guys. While you're all dying, I can go in and make this fight go longer. But all in all, I think maybe just hang up either the Thoth or the Horus, one or the other.
Right.
Either I'm down to have the big damage in the backline if you have a better peel support, or switch it up entirely. It's one of those situations where both teams have to go back and really strategize up, because I don't think either one of them is confident after that one.
And Trelly, I wonder now, even in a win, even after a win, I wonder if the Solar Scarabs, considering a Pele pick or ban here going into game 3 between the Scarabs and the Bolts, winner take all game 3, we finally get one here in phase 3. Because think back to game 1, Pele for Ven.
Sorry.
Right, game 2. Right. Think back to game 1, Pele perfect for Ven. Such a great team comp and well executed by the Bolts. Even in a loss, it was the Pele from Lasbra this time that was just making life difficult. I wonder if the Scarabs potentially considering just doing away with the Pele altogether, because I think game 2 looks a lot easier for the Scarabs if Laz isn't making really nice plays on that Pele throughout the game. But talked a bit about Hades, ping-ponging back and forth. Have to imagine the Bolts hoping that one makes it through. Though Basket on the tier, I think conversation to be had there. There were some moments where the Fearlesses, the Lawbringers, had a bit of an impact there out of the solo lane, but the band's starting to roll through. Ymir plus Daji, that's been the trend here for the Solar Scarabs. Morrigan and Yamoja. So the Morrigan not banned out in game 1, but banned out in game 2 and 3, and then Yamoja Guan Yu banned out all 3 games by the Olympus Bolts. So question for the Scarabs, is it Hades? Is it Cabrakan, which has been banned out against the Bolts every single game they've played? Tough spot here for the Scarabs. Are you picking the meta god? Are you banning out the meta god that's been rolling, or the Cabrakan pick that has looked so good for the Bolts in the past?
I might just ban Pele here and take one or the other. I think that could be the situation
Yeah,
that the
great point.
Scarabs have put themselves in, where there's 2 extremely powerful picks open at the moment that I can think of. In
Or
the Hades
ban
and the
none of
Cabrakan.
them and get 2 of the 3.
Yeah,
If they want the Pele, of
yeah,
course, right?
I think giving up Pele to get Hades would certainly be a good option, but you're definitely giving up the Hades to Bastion in
Right.
that slot as well. So there are some mind games
Yeah,
to be
there you
played,
go.
and it seems like they're going to take the lesser of the evils and say, you know what, let's just make sure that there's no Hades to be played this time around, which looks like the Bolts will just
Wow.
take that Cabrakan, and in turn, the Scarabs should, in theory, grab that Pele, which would then take it away from Lasbra as well.
I guess it's just been a transcendent enough pick for the Olympus Bolts. Has been banned out against them 100% of the time, except for this game. Now finally left open. We're going to get to see exactly what the Cabrakan does for the Bolts, why it's been taken away so consistently. Does it feel like a game-changing enough pick to you, Trelly? In your mind, are you surprised at the overwhelming ban presence against the Bolts with this Cabrakan?
The Cabrakan does not surprise me that it's getting this highly prioritized. I'll say the Cabrakan, where it usually goes, is what's surprising to me, because Cabrakan is one of the most banned picks in the SPL, period.
Yeah, not just against the Bolts,
Yeah,
right?
I think it's just because, the solo lane presence is so incredible. What we just saw with Hades with that Bancross Claw, it's the same exact thing for Cabrakan, but it's been more often than not played in support with just a regular hybrid build. So I guess it's just you get overwhelming amounts of pressure in the duo lane when you have this Cabrakan. The walls are always going to be annoying. You're essentially forcing the enemy support into a phantom shell if one of your carries can't get over those walls. It's just a pick that's extremely easy to pilot. There's no difficult abilities you have to land. I'm guessing that's the mindset here. Probably going to support, but I'll hold it off into a possible solo as well.
Now remember, Pele's been important even in a loss for the Olympus Bolts. Game 1 looked really good for Ven out of the mid lane. Double-digit kills, single-digit deaths. Same exact thing even in a loss in Game 2, where Lasber plays Pele out of the jungle. Pele left open if the Olympus Bolts feel like could synergize well with around that Cabrakan. Naja was a fantastic pick for the Solar Scarabs in Game 2, Trelly. Really looked good as far as setup goes for Sanford Soccer. Not the highest kill performance, but dropping down from the Windfire wheels into the Pillars of Agony on the Hades from Scary D was just so difficult. Do you think the Naja carries a similar potential even without the Hades on their side?
Yeah, I think if we already talked about it last game, but when you pick this Naja, I'm expecting big burst. The Merlin didn't really bring the big burst, but it turns out that Scary D could cover that just fine. He had the damage that they need. Now the Hades is gone, so as long as the mid lane pick here is something that can follow up on that Naja pick, I do think it carries the same sort of weight. We'll have to wait, though, because the Solar Scarabs got to wait for 2 more picks, and it looks like Artemis as well as the Lancelot, so a completely different look at the Olympus Bolts draft here going into game number 3. The Lancelot is going to be bringing a fair bit of pressure. It's got a decent matchup into the Naja, but, anyone who gets taken up into the sky has got the same chance of dying on end. Doesn't really matter what character you are at that point, so got to make sure those beads are on point. And the Scarabs are going to grab the Baron here. I have to imagine that's for support.
Wow, just the one time played so far here in the SPL. Hasn't won just yet. And guess when it got played, Trelly?
I would assume, yesterday?
Just yesterday.
Yeah,
Baron Samdi picked by Yark in a loss up against the J Dragons 1-4-9 in that game. So clearly valuing not only life of the party for disruption in team fights, but of course you get some decent sustain through that Baron. What does the Artemis tell you, though, here for the Olympus Bolts? Artemis far from the most prioritized hunter, but have seen a bit of Artemis get played. You think the Bolts are revealing too much here, or is that just standard plug-and-play comfort style pick for Barracuda?
Yeah, I think Bear is just tired of the magical style ADC. He wants
no
this
more
big,
Freya.
Yeah, no more Freya. We're done with that. And just in case Bear wanted to play it still, they banned it just to really stamp that one. So Artemis is going to have that crazy carry potential. It was probably Bear saw how much Stu was doing last game on the Cupid with Odibo. He's like, I kind of want to do that. That looked fun. He's absolutely deleting us here. So could be the game plan as well. They have a fair bit of peel as well as initiation with the Cabrakan and the Lancelot. Whoa. So this is a composition that I think Artemis can slot well into. But the Poseidon ban, that makes sense. The Amaterasu being taken away just in case Baskin wanted to play a pick like that. Looks like the Scarabs didn't want to deal with that overwhelming movement speed as well as objective shred that Ama could bring.
I do like Yark's hat. Reppin' House Unicorn from the Atlantis Leviathans Invitational. Did they end up... Who won? Actually, I left, so I didn't know who won. Remember, I got up and left.
Frustrated and you left because of
production's fault.
I was gonna say it wasn't Miff's fault, but it was Miff's face.
Well, the fact that Miff existed in that moment when his picture was taken, his fault. The fact that production put his picture on the screen was enough to have me driving away in my car.
My power
at the end of that broadcast. So Reppin' House Unicorn is Yark, but would love a Solar Scarabs team win up against the Bolts. Really, really difficult, I think, now trend moving into the next couple of weeks of this phase for whoever loses this one. Obviously, there's streaks. If the Bolts or the Scarabs lose, there's potential to win a bunch of sets in a row. But going 0-2 in your first week, trying to avoid being in that bottom 2. Remember, the top 6 teams from Phase 3 all get to go to the Phase 3 playoffs and have a chance at just qualifying to Worlds right then and there. Top 4 from that event will qualify The bottom two teams, 7 and 8 from the end of Phase 3, immediately go into play-ins the weekend prior to Worlds. You're going to be sitting and watching a lot of Smite happen before you get to play again.
Dragons of the rivers,
If you're the bottom two seeds at
obey
the end of
my
this phase
call.
in the SPL. Catch back up with the picks, though. Camazotz and Yu Huang for the Olympus Bolts. Camazotz presumably out of the solo lane. Kabrak and then support for Awesome Jake. And so if Sustain has been the name of the game, Camazotz provides that in spades. Although it could be Lancelot solo, I suppose, Trelly. We've talked about some flexibility between those two picks throughout the draft phase here so far.
Yeah, if it's between the Camazotz solo and jungle, I think I prefer it in the solo lane. The tankier you build, the less important it is to make sure you're landing every single Vampiric Bats. It's sort of like Thanatos Scythe in that sense, where you want to make sure you're landing all of those. I sat down with Captain Twig and talked about junglers, and he said he actually thinks it's more important if you're jungling this Camazotz to make sure you hit that. And if you're missing everyone, like I do, you know, that pick loses a little bit of value. So I think Lancelot, much easier to pilot in the jungle.
Are you saying you missed them all, or did Twig say that
No,
he was missing them all?
I'm the one who would be missing
Got it,
them.
okay.
Yeah, it's a hard ability to land. The point is, I think, for my money, Lancelot in the jungle, but you're right, there is some flexibility there, and I'm sure Basket wouldn't be missing those anyway,
Right.
so it doesn't matter in that slot. But looks like Charybdis in the last slot, something that Baronic likes a lot, but since there's a Merlin on field, I'm going to assume that Stu is taking some extra safety into that duo lane
you think
up
he
against
needed
the
it?
Artemis. Up against Artemis Kabrakan, yeah, I think he's able to just zoom away in the Whirlpool, not really worry about the walls or Tusky. So a smart pick there. I think Stuart was like, you know what, I know that if I get to late game, I can have a performance like I did in game number 2, where I'm hard carrying with like these Odibo procs and these Kinsai procs. So I think Stuart just wants a fast track to level 20.
Well, talk to me a bit about then maybe Jake's goals. If you're going up against this Charybdis in lane, I mean, I guess you're going to have Baron. No inherent movement abilities. I mean, you can zoom around a bit when you hit level 5. Is Jake hoping here that you can trap Charybdis in at level 5 with the walls? Or if you're Jake, are you trying to just rotate out of lane, find pressure elsewhere because of just now the safety that's been drafted in the dual lane for the Scarabs? Is there more value potentially elsewhere on the map?
I don't imagine Jake's going to put any bit of stock in trying to gank this Charybdis unless Stu is really, you know, bad with the Whirlpools. Like he just uses it a little bit early and then just kind of forgets where he has, like, positioning-wise. So Yark, I mean, the Baron Somni could certainly be killed, right? In the walls there, if you have enough damage, I think the CC chain could be huge. If you are starting that shell, that means you are susceptible to the chain stun of Tusky into the trap. It's going to be extremely annoying to deal with, as well as the CC that Kabrakan provides. So yeah, Jake could hang around if you're looking to kill Baron, but if not, I think your time is better spent letting Baron get free farm. You know, the same sort of style that you want to play for your ADC. Try and get to level 20 as quickly as possible. There's other kills to be found. You know, you got a Merlin in mid. Once that flickers down, could be an easy target. And especially up against the Yu Huang, you can usually force that out pretty easily.
What do you think relic-wise for Jake here? Do you think you need a blink at some point, try to close that gap, or is there too much utility elsewhere that you think you might need to prioritize?
I've seen the Ankh been coming back in a big way, and because it's just Baron and Naja, not something like the Terra, for example, I don't think you need Ankh, and in that case, you could just grab a shell and a blink if need be. So because it's Awesome Jake, and because I know he loves being the initiator, he loves being the first one into these team fights, I certainly would not be surprised if a blink was on the table. That just makes Lasber's job a ton easier if he's not the first one in, trying to engage, trying to force out these relics and these escapes.
We'll be getting into Game 3 between the Bolts and the Scarabs ASAP, but I appreciate you guys hanging with us for just a little bit longer. Now, early on in the draft, Trelly, we talked about Naja, and in your mind, you're thinking follow-up burst. In Game 2 for the Scarabs, it was a lot of Windfire Wheels into Pillars of Agony.
Yep.
There was an early Naja pick, followed by then Baron, Merlin, Charybdis. Do you see the follow-up to Naja now being able to look at the entire Solar Scarabs draft?
Yeah, it's certainly not as easy as just Naja ult into kill and then move on, but as long as you've got like a good amount of DPS, and as long as you're not taking someone up in the middle of a team fight where Sam is 100% dead when he hits the ground, as long as that's not the case, I think this Naja pick with the recent buffs has just been enough to make sure, hey, this crazy amount of CC is the reason we're picking this. I don't think it screams a Naja draft to me, but at this point, as long as you're able to get some safety and some comfortability, Sanford Soccer's been able to land those ults pretty consistently, and I think it sets up for the team regardless.
Now, this is more of a zoomed-out kind of thought process here. Remember, in the first couple of games of this phase, our thought process was, what can we learn about this Solar Scarabs team? Who's going to be stepping up? Who will be shot calling? How does the communication look? Again, it's Yark now at support for this team. And will the Solar Scarabs be able to translate individual skill into full-on team play? I think we got a bit of that in game 2. I mean, a very, very close game, very, very back and forth. When the death timers are long, that's when you're really battling with shot calls. Can we end? Can we go for a Phoenix? Where are all the players on the Olympus Bolts? That's the sort of stuff you have to look out for. And so, Troy, do you think the Solar Scarabs have proved to us? I mean, there's clearly a long phase to go. But do you think you've gotten a few answers for yourself that the Scarabs have some shot calling figured out? Do you think you saw in game 2 enough to tell you that the communication lines are forming for this team?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that game was a bit of a clown fiesta, but I think when the going got tough, when the Scarabs needed to make like decisive calls, like do we go for Titan here? Do we go for this Phoenix? Are we going back for Fire?
Right.
I didn't see the wishy-washy of like one person going and getting picked and one person backing up. It seemed like they had one clear voice, whether that was Yark, Sam, whatever.
Right.
One clear voice telling them what to do, and it seemed like they were acting on those calls. Again, there were some split team fights, but when the going got tough, as we said, they got going, and I think that's what I needed to see from them, especially this early on.
And I actually really like the way that game ended. Where Barracuda's still back, and there's just a few members of the Scarabs running in, and Baronic realized, you know what, I can just flicker over. I can go back with the rest of the minions. You guys deal with Barracuda, and it's small decision-making points like that I think Scarabs fans should have some confidence for this team and their ability to shot call and move forward throughout not only this set, hopefully grab a win here for the Scarabs and their fans in game 3, but throughout the rest of this phase, that there's so much talent on this team that a unit maybe is forming. Now for the Olympus Bolts, this is a team where yes, you lose Haddix, but you add in Baskin, probably feeling like you're going to hopefully be able to pick up close to where you left off during phase 2. You had a nice long win streak. I think could be shaken a bit here today if they're not able to grab a win in game 3.
Yeah, I think the mental game is definitely harder on the Bolts right now because they should have been able to close this up 2-0 in their mind, right?
Right.
A couple little fixed errors here and there, and we're just walking home 2-0. We're probably already home at this point because it's just been a bit. So they definitely want to make sure that they don't weigh on that too much and just get the job done here. That seems to be exactly what they would want to do at this point, but it's a difficult situation because it was a little bit of a washy game.
Right. Now, long phase, so even if this is a loss for, well, it's going to be a loss for one of the two teams, but plenty of games to be played down the stretch for either of them. We've talked a bit about, the Artemis and maybe potential lack of mobility throughout the game. I'm looking at a Kamazats and a Yu Huang, two also very safe picks alongside the Charybdis on the other side. So there's a couple picks in this game that feel somewhat safe from what could be backline dive. How big of a microscope do you think Barracuda's under this game by that Sanford soccer dive?
Well, this is one of the most annoying things about Najah when diving something like the Artemis, because if you sash in, you better have a clear goal.
That's
you
true.
better say, these beads need to be down, or I'm eating a Tusky into
That's
a trap, and I'm probably going to die. So it's not easy diving in Artemis, but someone else has to get the beads. Or if your goal is, I'm going to get the beads, you better have a clear way out. Because if not, again, you just take so much damage. Sam probably wants to start the beads. Blink is that's always the dream, hitting a Blink Najah, but it's just so easy to see it coming and use your CC immunity. It's just not an easy dive to kill an Artemis ever in the late game, but early on when she's not doing too much damage and can't return your kill potential, it's not going to be the hardest time to try and find a gank, assuming that Bear is playing, like far up in lane.
Right, maybe easier to hit the individual ability because lack of movement ability for the Artemis, but once you're there,
Yeah.
you got to be able to capitalize because there's just so much lockdown from Barracuda on the back end of those fights. Big one here between the Solar Scarabs and the Olympus Bolts. Winner improves to 1-1. Loser drops down to 0-2 for the phase. Gormizer and Mifflin will take us into game number 3.
And what an exciting game I'm anticipating, just based on the pace of the first two. Anything could happen here. The Scarabs, one away from maybe being what I would consider an upset here for a team coming in with as many roster changes as they are. And, of course, just a teensy bit thrown out there for the Bolts, considering the week that they've had so far. One game Mifflin separating them. And we get relatively standard, in quotes, for some of these drafts. Specifically, though, a hardcore Baron Samedi thrown into the support here. Like they said on the desk, played yesterday, did end up losing, but as you mentioned earlier, the Dragons, just a difficult team to try and take on. How do you see this pick faring so far?
Well, Yarkor tried his best to make the Baron Samedi work in the Soul lane a while back. It's been about a year, but has clearly got some experience on this pick. He looked good on it individually, just didn't exactly fit the compositions that the Leviathans were running at the time of. Whether or not it's got decent matchup into the Olympus Bolts, I like it in the Barracuda, so long as some of those CC immunities that Trelly was highlighting are down. It's pretty decent into Jake as well. Bracken generally just tries to get in your face. If he's in your face, it's a lot easier to land that stun from life of the party. But the primary concern for this god, Baron Somni, in support is the lack of mobility. It's very similar to the Ymirs, the Areses, the picks along those lines of, hey, sure, it might be really good mid-game, and late game it's a phenomenal source of healing. Early game could just struggle.
Well, Scary D, he's struggling a little bit, right? Just low health bar in terms of how the lane matchup is going. Game number 1, absolutely explosive from the Bolts, from the get-go. Very good comeback from the Scarabs in game number 2 after they were down 4,000 gold. Jake maybe biting off more than he can shoot here. No, it's going to be in mid lane. Sam so low. 3 different players across 3 different lanes. And not a single first blood just yet for any of the aggressors. Although not for lack of trying. Baskin still on that list. And this Mifflin is what's really interesting to me. The Scarabs had a long time to get their footing in game number 2. And it worked out well for them here. Do you think this is a comp that benefits from having a little bit of time to cook, or do you think that they can get scrappy really quick?
Well, late game, I'm expecting Charybdis, the itemization, you know, Odibo, kin size, you're really waiting on some of that. So as far as the dual lane is concerned, mid to late game, Merlin has phenomenal scaling, generally around that mid-game point. Sanford Soccer needs to wait on those guys to scale up because he's just generating opportunities to find follow-up with those ultimates.
Yeah.
The only real early game piece of the Scarabs draft likely is the King Arthur. Whereas on the other hand, the Olympus Bolts have got some very, very strong early game. Lancelot out of the jungle can establish pacing very well, as can Baskin on his Camazons.
All right, now it is the Scarabs dictating a little bit of the pace here in the duo lane. Barra needs a lot of poke, has to play this one cautiously. Minions going to be traded with the tower. Maybe they go in for a little more. Trimples are going to be good. They had the slow from Suppress the Insolent. But it's not going to be enough. That might be, by the way, Mifflin, the weirdest ability name to try and drop in the middle of a cast. To suppress
Transgressor's Fate.
Which one's Transgressor's Fate?
That's her. That's Artemis's trap.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hate that.
Channels the Vengeful Assault. That's the 2, by the way.
Yeah. Caledonian Boar.
Yeah, dude. I'm not saying any of those abilities ever.
And that's good on you, because I don't think anybody does. I
I'm
think we actually
it.
just educated at least a half of the Smite game chat, because who knew? At least one of those abilities had to be fresh for somebody. We'll figure it out, though. Chat, press the number correlating to the ability that you just learned the name of for Artemis, and there you go. Some mod is hating me right now. Either way, Bolts in a okay spot, Scarabs in an okay spot, right? There's going to be the trap, and it's going to be enough. Oh, man, the damage is there, and one more auto finds the first blood. Barra is able to get that.
Sam's
Stu has some good damage. Sam is coming in. There's a great ring toss. The damage is low. Barra needs one more auto, and Sam is able to find a great sash, and they're going to keep the chase on. Jake is one hit, but they just don't have the capability to close that gap. And with Lazar on the way.
He's got ult.
I would have thought they were stopping, but no. Lazar wants to go in for more. Whiffs a little bit, goes for the ult. As the leap down, they're splitting the damage. Sam seems to be the target. Vin on the way as well. It's a matter of time before they find this pick, and Sam's gonna die to the tower. Gives credit over to Veneno.
Man, Sam, that was just petty. Wants to make sure the jungler doesn't get credit. Won't allow him to pull ahead.
Ooh.
Good ultimate.
Oh.
Locks him in. Stu just needs a little bit more damage. Floats into the tower. Then not enough, and now Yarkor is back.
And what a heal from Yark as well. Unfortunate, not enough. Vin still able to find the kill, and it's a 3-for-1 trade favoring the Bolts.
That is insane, man. The thinnest of margins. Just a little bit more damage from Yarkor. Would have likely finished that one off. Surprised we didn't see the rotation from Baronic at all there. How long was Ven in that fight? I'm pretty sure he showed up at level 4, stuck around till 5, channeled the ultimate, and we still don't have a counter rotation from Baronic. Was actually Barracuda on respawn, moving in towards mid. Could have likely caught Baronic out or stopped him from rotating himself, but gotta think with how aggressively the Bolts were positioning in that lane.
Yeah.
Just one more Scarab. It's all it would have taken to really turn that fight around. Instead, it goes to the Bolts.
Especially a resurgence from the Baron Samedi. Feels like it's a really good spot for them to be in. Doesn't really lead to much. You know, you think about 3-1 kill leads, things like that, first blood conversations, all sorts of stuff. 400 gold separating these teams. It's nowhere near enough to really feel like it's mattering. Most of it will be an experience. We might see some of that kind of trickle through, just a little ahead for Vin, a little ahead there for Bera. And I expect that to be something they try to capitalize on as best they could. The walls from Jake, I mean, you had mentioned it, but specifically Cabrakan working well with this Manticore spike feels like it's going to give an extra edge, not just to the early game for the Bolts, but to the Bolts in general.
Yeah, Jake is very tanky right now and does as much damage as any jungler on the map. That is what Manticore Spike affords this Cabrakan so early in the game. Jake is in a very good position as of now to impact the match. Yarkor is still waiting to finish up his first item. So I'll be keeping my eyes on the Cabrakan, whether or not he decides to rotate out, where he puts his attention, and where he decides to leverage that aggression. Otherwise, you could leave Barracuda alone on an island in this lane, and he's going to do just fine. Charybdis, not exactly the most aggressive hunter, instead generally picked for her safety, and now at an entire level down this early in the game, Barracuda's on smooth sailing.
They're going to be able to coast for a little bit. That's what they're trying to do for the Scarabs. They invaded the Greater Scorpion. They're invading the blue buff. They are slowly but surely stripping away whatever they can find from the Scarabs. Or sorry, from the Bolts. Going to get the Totem of Coup as well. So again, small victories every single spot they can find it. Stewart took a little bit of damage from a trap there. Able to escape it. Beads coming back up for the Charybdis plus the Whirlpool. Feels like some of those ganks are going to become a lot more difficult over in the left lane. But like you said, Bera's kind of coasting 2 levels up. They might not need another one.
No, I'm thinking Barracuda is just fine in this lane. The only thing that's going to stop him now is a rotation from the Solar Scarabs proper. And Baronic thinks about it, as does Yarkor, but it's spotted out by Barracuda, who resets himself back to neutral. Now that Jake is here, could be a reaggress.
There's going to be a little bit of damage, but not a steal for the purple buff. Jake standing aggressively as well. Again, slower pace than game number 1, faster pace than game number 2, as these teams try to figure out where exactly they're going. And it's small differences between these, right? Having the Baron's Brew on the side of the Scarabs maybe helping with some of the sustain in lane. Now getting the Manticore Spite just finished there for Hardcore. Feels like maybe opening up a little bit more. I also want to ask you about this because, you know, there's been a constant changing of the guard when it comes down to relics for supports, and at least what they get
about the
first.
Scarabs like roster.
Oh no, I mean, we've been doing a lot of that. No, instead, I wanted to ask about this because we're getting, we've been in metas where it's an immediate shell and then shell upgrade, or it's an immediate, I mean, so it's been a while, but Sunders, right? We've seen all sorts of variants. Where's this med coming into the play?
Cloak of the Ascetic is crazy. Meditation during the laning phase allows you to get a little bit over-aggressive. Like, we saw it from Yarkor. Essentially, had he gone any other relic, he would have died for First Blood on, I believe it was 3rd wave. But because of Meditation, was able to survive in the Tremors from Jake. But Cloak of the Ascetic is so powerful for creating situations where otherwise you just wouldn't get the kill thanks to that CDR.
Well, Scary D, that's the attempted kill right now for the Bolts, and they're just going to find it. Great walls from Jake. Forces a different path from the King Arthur. The dash is not far enough, and they're going to be able to collapse in on that. Tick over to a 4 kill count. Exactly what you're saying. I mean, we get to see the meditation in that fight. Get those cooldowns up a little bit quicker and allow your team to have a power that maybe wouldn't have been there. I think with that pathing probably was going to be there, but either way,
a while.
Showcases, I think, the strength of it as a relic.
Sam lines up against 2. Lasbra does not have beads. Has opted to go for Blink in that first slot. So, Wind, Fire, Wheels, certainly a very dangerous ability the Olympus Bolts need to concern themselves with. But luckily for the Bolts, Sash does not connect. And Sam for Soccer allows that one to fizzle out immediately. But yeah, Cloak of the Ascetic it really allows these situations, especially in the early game, to just absolutely change the face of some of these team fights. We saw multiple usages of Lancelot's one. We saw Jake find, I believe it was 3 stuns over the course of about 4 seconds in that lane. It's just so good for these fights.
Lockdown onto Sam seems good so far. Yu Huang damages there.
Great ult.
Beads, great from Vin. Blocks it out, but remember that Najah gets those prots now anyway. There's going to be the lockdown pull in onto Jake. Walls are good though, and that's going to be a rotation. Lasbra tries to open up and create something from the opportunity created by the support, and they get rid of the jungler. But can they get out with their lives? Lasbra making as much space as possible. Baskin finding space and maybe looking for more. If he can get Bat Out of Hell is there, goes for the collapse, has the kill. Now just has to stay alive. The tower doing some work, Merlin doing some work, King Arthur doing some work. Maybe a little bit too much for the Bolts to chew, but they get the kill.
Yeah, Baskin a bit over-aggressive there for my liking. If he had 2 more stacks in his Transcendence, Screech finishes it. If it were Bluestone, Screech finishes it. But instead, has to dedicate that ultimate, swoops aggressively to close gap, and leaves him high and dry inside of that tower. Good counterplay from Veronic to make sure there is a trade out. Now it's Ven under threat.
And then should be fine, no beads, but there's a tower right there waiting for him. Jake rotating in, not much you can do in this sort of scenario. And instead, I turn my eyes once again towards where these, I mean, not only the builds have been going, but also where this team pressure is. 6-3 kills read in favor of the Bolts. And they might be looking to put a little bit more on there. Good control from Lazar. Great walls from Jake one more time. And they're going to lock down this King Arthur and find themselves another kill.
Way too aggressive from Scary D there, man. That has been one of his Achilles heels for a very long time, just not knowing when he's allowed to get aggressive on that side of the map. Had there been more presence from the Solar Scarabs on the left, maybe in just taking the attention of 3, Scary would have opened the door for a Gold Fury, but considering the positioning of his own team and where the Olympus Bolts were, that's just a free pick. Buff confirmed by the Bolts, buff stolen by the Bolts as well. And Baskin, who's actually about a level and a half down just 2 minutes ago, actually swings the lead in his favor now. That was a valuable kill for the Bolts. And it just continues to get worse. Pyromancer off the back end of it as well. That was a costly mistake from the Scarab Soul Laner.
Speaking of level deficit, Sam has been playing a little bit of catch up. Was about 2 levels, maybe it's 1.5, separating him. Yeah, 10 to 12. He's now going to be struggling. Doesn't get the option for a second relic. Beads just now purchased by Lasbra. So a little bit of a power spike there, along with then Jake taken up into the sky. Naja damage, barely anything to worry about there, but it's the setup that matters here. Good walls, but with no one around, what does it matter? Jake just eliminated, caught out, and killed off.
We'll see if the Scarabs can do to the Bolts what the Bolts had just done to the Scarabs. 1 pick into a couple buff steals and a Pyromancer. Scarabs find their one. Gold Fury pulled out. And it's burning incredibly fast. Barracuda needs to get there very soon.
That does have Tusky. Sash is going to be good. There's the CC immunity. Stun immediately there. Scarabs get the Gold Fury, but can they escape? Hardcore is low. Lasbra looking for the kill in the back. Barra looking for a kill onto Sam. It's a split fight, and Lasbra is going to find one. Veronic, though, turns it around, and Sam is able to escape there. Blink used. So they only trade 1. Their support for a kill onto the jungler plus a Fury. And Mifflin, you know they're happy about that.
Yeah, the Scarabs, they made out like bandits, man. Once Ven rotates through, I thought, okay, you're losing 2, maybe 3 people for certain on the side of the Solar Scarabs. But that was a criminal Yu Huang ultimate. Connects with nobody, spends so much time lining up, doesn't even cast out the other abilities. Sanford Soccer allowed to just walk away for free at the tail end of that one. The Olympus Bulls could have gotten a lot more there. Fortunately for the Solar Scarabs, that's not how it pans out. Even game now. It's only a couple hundred gold separating these 2 teams. Neutral objectives desync, so maybe we see the next fight erupt around this Pyro on respawn.
Baskin. Unfortunate little bounce there for him. Just well timed, well shot by Sam. Wondering where the next fight breaks out. Pyromancer, as you mentioned, not up for a while. Same thing for the Fury. So where these options stand for either of these teams to get aggressive feels like it is really dependent on the junglers. And right now, Sam, I mean, look, last game we called him out for it, and I think this game we got to do the opposite. He missed some sashes in game 2, slowed down the pace I think the Scarabs could have set otherwise. He's been on point with getting targets for his players, and specifically setting up Veronic. That burn from the Merlin is just unreal.
It is, and Sam spent a lot of time doing exactly that, setting up for his team, ganking these lanes, trying to make sure nobody's falling behind at his own detriment, now about a level behind on Lazara. When Lazarus rotated through, the kills actually land to him. So 3, 1, and 3 for the jungler of the Olympus Bulls. It's the 1, 2, and 3 for the Solar Scarabs, reflected in both build and experience. Well, you'd ask where the next bit of aggression is. I think it's a hurry up and wait situation. There's not much to fight over on map as of right now, barring maybe a couple buff invids.
Well, maybe solo kill potential. Scary D getting the better of Baskin here, waiting for the bat out of hell to land. He's going to land there, heal up a little bit. Scary D tries to find a way to close the gap, but Lasbra joins the fray.
Won't ult.
Saves his own solo laner. Like you said, doesn't ult there. Maybe could have even turned things around. They just didn't feel ready or maybe comfortable committing.
Yeah, perhaps concerned about a counter rotation from the Solar Scarabs ulting into the tower up against a King Arthur. Not exactly an easy thing, an easy decision to make. So instead, holds on to it and realizes even if we do kill Scary D, what's the best case scenario? Maybe you take out a tier 1 on right. Not exactly the most valuable. Worst case, you trade your own life. Wouldn't be worth it for him.
There's a root. Oh man, Sam's taking way too much damage here. The walls are good, but not great enough. Lasbra over the wall.
We save those.
Able to find the kill onto the jungler. Then just a little shy of getting a root. Maybe create another one. So small bit of aggression, big kill onto the opposing jungler. 2 levels retained by Lasbra. Both relics stay up for both of them. But that is a huge win. Gets the ult off the timer. And it feels like it gives the Bolts something to hang their hat on.
Yeah, Lasbra needs to get back to base soon, spend up all this gold in pocket. Pyromancer going to be spawning up very, very shortly. No mana for the Lancelot either. Gotta hope that he's able to get back in time. Sanford Soccer rejoins the land of the living, so should be able to put up a defense if it is the Olympus Bolts idea to move in towards that neutral objective. As of now, it's a whole lot of posturing on the right-hand side. Bolts just looking for a bit of poke. If they can send someone back to base now, we're making it a whole lot easier to look at the Pyro.
Aggression on the Scary D. With a little bit of downtime, I don't think any of these solo laners are finding a kill on the other.
It's been close.
I want to ask you, it has actually been close, and you know what? We have to wait for it because Baskin, it's not just the solo laners anymore. There's 4 Scarabs on the right-hand side of the map. Nothing to work for the Bolts on the left side. Pyromancer is up. You have to think that's the immediate call for the Scarabs. Hardcore leading the way over. No one's pulled it just yet. Scary D and Hardcore going to start the DPS. Sam's here, Baronic's here, Jake over the wall, Vin with Vision. Lasbra, Bara joining the fight. There's going to be the ult. It's going to be a big pull. Bolts get the Pyromancer from the Scarabs, and now it's the fight afterward. Good walls from Jake keep people from escaping, but instead it's aggression onto Venenu. Scary D leading that fight and trying to find the mid laner. In the back, though, Baskin finds a deep pull, goes for Stewart, goes for Baronic, goes for Hardcore, and finds them. They lose Vin, but they're getting so much more. Sam just trying to create some space and get out of here. No blink, no ult, and not a lot to work with. Lasbra going for the cutoff path. There's the blink, there's the kill. And it's a 4-for-1 swing, plus a pyro, and potentially a fire.
Scary still has blink and ultimate. Could try and slow this one down or just pick out Lasbra on the rotation in. Kacha slip it in the jungle. Lasbra goes to the Shadow Realm. Jake buying some time. Fire Giant incredibly low.
This is good for Scary D. He's walking in. He's got good damage. Stun is there. Scary trying, but he gets killed off. The Bolts get the fire for 3. And they're able to start getting aggressive now, trying to figure out where they turn on the map. 6 towers still standing. The right-hand side seems to be their first target.
But we got to talk about the unsung hero of that engagement for the Olympus Bolts. Ven comes up massive for his team.
Yeah.
The ultimate, so good. Slows down the Pyromancer, displaces 2 of the Solar Scarabs. But more importantly, it's the survival after the fact. He lived for upwards of 10 seconds while Scary D is in hot pursuit the entire time, juking around the tremors from Awesome Jake. Just separates that fight so well. And in a separated fight, the Olympus Bolts divide and conquer 3v3. And the back goes with them. Pincer back in, pick up Sanford Soccer on the tail end, and the Fire Giant as well. Lands on some priority targets at that. Barracuda going to make short work of these structures. No longer are we on the Freyas. This is an Artemis. That's an Executioner in the build. This standard Hunter stuff. These towers going to make... It's going to be like a hot knife through butter, man. He just needs a little bit of space.
A very different game from Bara that we're going to get to see here. Tusky available. Should the Scarabs even show up, and there's not much of a chance for that. An initial Fire Giant, 18 minutes in, only on 3. I mean, Mifflin, this is one that you're lucky if you're getting tier 2s, right? Like, it is just the aggression that you're able to find around the map, trying to get a little bit of gold.
Not going to take that much luck.
Although 6,000 gold, that's now in their favor.
That's
the Bolts
right.
are feeling pretty good about this positioning, and it's seemingly out of nowhere.
Yeah, Solar Scarabs aren't even grouped up on the tier 2s. Maybe they were thinking along the same lines as you. No way The Olympus Bolts are going to risk it now. Not a risk when you're swinging for 200 per auto attack. Tier 2
It's a
gone.
far cry from the 40s last
Yeah,
game.
this is much, much better. Tier 2 and mid gone as well. Olympus Bolts gold lead just absolutely out of control. The golden pocket makes not for a lead. They haven't spent it just yet, so it's a bit more even than it appears, at least in the stats.
They've got 2 minutes left on this power play. 3-level advantage for Barra over Stewart. I thought for sure that we were about to see the beginning of a push into a Phoenix. Maybe 20 minutes is a little too early for them. Maybe they just don't feel confident. They did just get a massive gold infusion. So this is going to be a back and buy for the Bolts. Plus all of the things that are going to be coming up. Stripping the jungle, setting themselves up for success. If you're Jake, you're getting an upgraded starter. If you're Barra, guess what? You can get an upgraded starter. Same thing there for Baskin. We're starting to see these buys come through.
We are, and still plenty of time left on the Fire Giant power play. You've got Minion Wave pushed up in mid, so if you so choose, Lazar can still act as a solo agent there. Otherwise, group up on that right tier 2 has an enhanced Minion Wave working its way through. Instead, though, split the map. Olympus Bolts, I suppose, just trying to push this farm a little bit further. They don't have the absolute most time to play with, so instead, collect as much farm as possible, get ready for subsequent Pyromancers and Fire Giants. About a minute out from the Pyro, and then a minute past that, the Fire Giant will barrel back down towards the Battlegrounds. But any individual pick could go a whole long way for the Olympus Bolts. Maybe it is the left side Phoenix Siege they actually want. Just wanted to spend that gold before they regroup for it. Solar Scarab's defense is strong, though. Any team that's got a Merlin on it, never easy to siege.
No, never. Although now with the split, that might be what the Bolts need. They have 30 seconds left on the power play. Aggression is there. The Phoenix so low. All they need is a little bit more time. Bear, though, takes a lot of damage, has to fall back. There's the Merlin, and it's exactly what they need. The Artemis is put down in the ground. Up into the sky goes
Big
Sam
whiff.
with Jake. Lands down, is able to find the kill. Baskin, Finn trying to see what they can salvage from this one, but the answer seems to be nothing. Not only does the Phoenix stand, the Scarabs get 3.
Miscommunication from the Olympus Bolts. Barracuda digs in his heels, says, we're taking this Phoenix now. If it costs me my life, so be it. The rest of the Bolts were not on that same page. Jake and Ben start to back themselves up. Self-preservation, the name of the game. And eventually say, well, we can't just let Barra die for nothing. Try and step back forward. And weren't quite able to make anything of it. The Solar Scarabs, specifically Scary D, really comes up big there. That King Arthur creates so much space.
Lazarus looking for a pick.
He's got it.
Stewart right now. Yeah, oh, he's got it. By a mile, he's got it. And able to find that one, losing the Pyromancer out on the other side. Nothing much they can do about this. Bolt's still respawning from that last engagement. Pyromancer goes towards the Scarabs, keeps the gold within the 6,000 range, although not very comfortable at all. Admittedly, Mifflin, they've come back from something similar so far this set, so I don't think we can count them out too far. Map state, though, definitely starting to wear on them. 1 tower still standing, 1 Phoenix relatively weak. Meanwhile, 5 towers up for the Bolts, and some much more convincing engagements from them. 0, 3, and 8 for Jake, 6, 2, and 6, 4, 1, and 4 for Lasbra and Baskin.
Lazar's been going crazy all day.
All day. I mean,
That's
solo
it.
kills, yeah, I mean, and you know what? It might just be a mic drop moment. I don't know if we need to go back in on it. He's just been going crazy all day. Fire Giant respawns, started up by the Bolts. This one almost exactly 5 minutes later, just a shy short of the 6 full minutes. Bolts are gonna get it, no contest from the Scarabs. They're grouping up on left right now. Here the Scarabs. Gonna have a Primal Fury spawning here soon, but you have to wonder, Mifflin, is this just a split push base race? I mean, is it even worth it?
Well, you can at least get a tier 2 because you're not defending your own tier 2. I suppose only tier 1 this time around. Only thing the Solar Scarabs are willing to defend should be those Phoenixes. So instead, get as much global gold as you can, reset, then try again. I think they likely did have the opportunity to stick around, take out that tier 2 tower, considering how close that minion wave was. But the Scarabs concerned that maybe the Olympus Bolts would stick around for the Phoenix, head back to base, and realize, oh man, could have got just a little bit more gold and experience. That said, does at least get the Olympus Bolts out of their own hair. Fire Giant for 3 minutes, though. It's a whole lot of time to play with. Left side, Phoenix still trying to regenerate at half HP. Barracuda nearly souls it out last time. Likely will be able to this time around. I'm keeping my eyes on Scary D and whether or not he can close gap onto Ven or Barracuda. Sam for Soccer comes up massive in that last base defense. finds the sash on Ibera, immediately 180 flicks, takes awesome Jake up into the air with the Windfire wheels. Space creation like that does not come entirely often. So hero play from Sanford Soccer maybe could repeat it going forward. Otherwise, the only one who can really carry the weight of this defense is the one we highlighted a little bit earlier. It's Boronic. This Merlin needs to start putting out some damage.
Was enough, granted, while it's not a lot, still enough. Overall, top 4 in the game. Was able to help find a kill on Debera because of that damage. See how this ends up being grouped up for them. On left, once again, for the Bolts. A couple of minions working with them, while Lazar and Bastion trying to whittle away in mid. Sam, Scary D, matching the rotation from them. It's going to be a boxing match between solo laners. Phoenix doing some numbers. Left side Phoenix has regened all of its health. The Bolts have to do this the old-fashioned way, and a very difficult one at that. Every single ult's available, but Mifflin not the best engage when it comes down to it. I mean, diving under the Phoenix, I guess it's got to be Jake.
Yeah, Phantom Shell is available for Yarkor, though, so Jake, even with a good cage, is going to need to do it twice if he wants to find the value. Otherwise, I don't think it really needs to be an engage. Just create a little bit of space so that Barra can hit this bird.
Well, Bastion's creating a little bit of space, so is Lasper. They're going deep, and they're getting
More
the
than a
kill. They
little.
get rid of Boronic, and that's the Mage off the board. That's going to open up opportunities. Lasper loses his life. Barra gets the Phoenix, but now is under pressure, trying to find the kill. Windfire wheels off the mark, but it does not matter. They still get rid of the carry. 2 for 1, plus the bird. The Bolts losing out on an extra player, but getting a very impactful objective.
So many relics used so quickly, but some maintain. Key relics for the Olympus Bolts, both Beads and Aegis available for Ven, so a bit of safety there if he wants to play with his life. Solar Scarabs, though, 4 strong, can still keep up some presence. I doubt we see any more of a siege attempt. Instead, expect a whole lot of this. Olympus Bolts work through the jungle, take away the farm, try and reset. Gonna have to do it all over again. Fortunately, are able to take out that left side bird, so this next Fire Giant likely will be enhanced by the time the Olympus Bolts finish it off. Should be a bit easier. Fortunate for the Bolts to take away the most valuable bird from the Solar Scarabs. But that damage outpouring, that DPS, Boronic, Stewart, both doing so much now. I think the Olympus Bolts need to start putting respect on those two.
A lot of respect, at least towards Boronic last time. He was #1 target. They got rid of him. Maybe Stewart getting away with more than he should be at this point, especially watching the damage numbers as they start to ride up. I expect Stewart slowly but surely climbing his way through there, as long as he's able to hit some of these. Granted, middle of the pack right now, just a little behind Vera, not by a ton, but enough that it's noticeable. Pyromancers respawned, Fury's down, Fire Giant's going to come back in a little under a minute. The Bolts are in a power position with 9,000 gold up on their opponents. And Mifflin is starting to feel slowly like they're bleeding out the Scarabs. Not enough that it's over, but enough that they've got just absolute control of the FG pit.
Yeah, my primary concern for the Solar Scarabs is you can put up your defense on your base as many times as you want. Your composition is very, very good at that. So that might be your most favored engagement. But let's say it's the Solar Scarabs in a proactive position. They defend the base again. They're grouped up on the Fire Giant. How's the fight look in neutral territory? I'd argue not very good. We haven't seen just about anything from Yarkor this match. Healing, not exactly the highest. Doug, if we get a look at those charts, let's see actually how much Yarkor has been able to put out. Just about 5,000. Considering how many team fights we've taken in enclosed corridors this game, I'd argue that should be likely a little bit higher, and a lot of it likely coming from the meditation itself. No real engagement factor from the Solar Scarabs. Is it Scary D going in with the ultimate every single time? It can't be.
Well, they got to figure out what they want to do. They're getting engaged on, at least in the jungle. A little bit of damage thrown Hardcore's way. Scary D as well, and Sam eating a little poke from Veneno.
That hits hard.
And yeah, like sneakily hard, right? Like quietly hard. Similar build overall to what Boronic has, except he's got the Obsidian Shard now. And that's been helping him out.
That
Walls
hits too
lock
hard.
off Scary D. And Scary D, you go up into the air, but how much are you going to be able to do? The ult from Veneno is enough to lock him down. Boronic is the next target. Baskin closes the gap, slows
you're
him
done.
down, and is just going to find the kill. Fire Giant could be the call, but with fire minions inside the Titan room, Mifflin, they're moving forward.
That's exactly what I'm talking about, though, Gores. Scary says, well, someone's got to get in there and check on this Fire Giant. Tries to walk in on his own, not taking enough and not enough CC to be that guy. Gets shut down, and now the Solar Scarabs have their back against the wall.
This is going to be the chance for them to try and make a defense. Will they be able to find their engage? Barra takes a little bit of poke immediately. Lasper's up on the horse. They're going to be going in. There's Tusky for some stuns and CC, and they are focusing the Titan. Lasbra, just a distraction at this point while the damage dealers look for the win. And in a 2-0 fashion, the Bolts are going to take out, 2-1 fashion. Bolts are going to take out the Scarabs.
Yeah, we'll call it the Scarabs 2-0 because they're always going 3. The one's guaranteed for the Solar Scarabs. Impressive play by the Olympus Bolts, just keeping dominance from minute 1 to minute done, reflective of the rest of this set. Game 1, it was the Olympus Bolts in control the entire time. Game 2, Olympus Bolts in control until one major fumble around that Gold Fury / Fire Giant. Game 3, learned their lesson. No more fumbles. The Olympus Bolts take it home.
And they're able to find this one, again, a lot more convincing, larger lead, very, very controlled team fights as far as things go for them. They were focused on finding the win. After a stumble, though, I mean, you have to think about it. The way the fights look for the Scarabs in Game 3, and definitely in Game 2, goes to showcase that it's not going to be as easy to take over that team as maybe it would have been thought because of roster changes. Either way, I think they can leave today with their heads held high, maybe not as high as they'd like because of a win, but still pushing the Bolts to 3, an impressive feat. But the Bolts win either way. We'll go back to the desk to break it down.
That's right. Now we've seen some examples of the Scarabs in these real close-knit, late-game type of team fights. Unfortunately, fall short here in game number 3, but are able to capitalize on that type of moment in game number 2. Olympus Bolts get their first win of Phase 3 over the Scarabs in 3 games. Now, Lasbra has a day. Even in a loss, Lasbra looks fantastic in game 2, amazing in game 1 and game 3.
Oh, yeah.
Figured there would be some growing for this Bolts team to be done for this Bolts team. Replacing a Soul Laner, Baskin slots in pretty well. I'm sure the Bolts themselves would have preferred a cleaner set. Just happy to get the win here. Scarabs, very, very sneaky team, a team that can take anyone to 3. And the Olympus Bolts able to really come together here and make the picks happen at the end of game 3, grab the win.
Yeah, I gotta echo your sentiment about Lasbra. Just had a fantastic set. Every single game looked great. Baskin, loved the gameplay throughout. The tier, I think, just was not a great draft for it, and the competition wasn't the best. But this Kamazot's hit. All of his abilities were hitting. He was able to get to the backline pretty consistently, and that's exactly what you would want from your solo laner. And then, as long as, Barra was tired of the magical ADCs, he wanted to play the Artemis this time around, and I think they had a little bit more ability damage, more team fight presence with Tusky just bouncing around throughout the fight, and Ven not on the Thoth as well. I got to highlight that. I did like, he did good damage, but I think this was a much safer look for him on the Yu Huang. He had some good ultimates, some whiffs here and there, but just an all-out good performance there for the Bolts.
Well, and ultimately, Yu Huang's safe enough that even if your role in the fight is to just try to draw some eyes, get out, re-engage, then able to do that just fine. So the Olympus Bolts able to get their first win of the phase here in Phase 3. They take them to 3 games. Solar Scarabs drop, but the Olympus Bolts on top. And as such, we are with Mifflin and the Bolts for the post-game interview.
I'm in the booth with the Olympus Bolts after a very entertaining set at that. Back and forth games, except for when it was only 4th, which were games 1 and 3. But game 2, though, a bit back and forth. But despite all of it, even in a loss, Lazar, you looked really good all day today. What's going on, man? What's changed? Is it just that Pele juice? Like, what's up?
I don't know. I always look good.
It's true, you do always look good, but come on, there was a little bit something different today, man. I mean, you absolutely were just dominating the map, the phenomenal rotations, great objective play. Well, what's changed between phases? Because this is a different look at Lasbra.
I don't know. I just feel confident today, and we had good pressure in most lanes, and we won majority of the fights, so it's easy to look good then.
Fair enough. The jungler's credo. If everyone's looking good, jungle's looking especially good. But Lazar talks about some 1 lanes. Basket, now that you've had an opportunity to play against a couple of the best players in the SPL, in the Soul lane, how are you feeling about your adaptations back to this role?
Definitely still feeling pretty rusty. Yeah, had a pretty bad game 2, a couple good games over the weekend, but yeah, definitely still feeling really rusty. I think the main thing is I have to sort of play a lot of matchups that I haven't played before, so yeah.
I chose to talk to the 2 most humble players in the Bolts. I'll never make that mistake again. Next time we'll talk to Ven. I'm sure he has some choice words, but that's it. This time we got to clear the booth.
Yeah, to further clarify that, a rusty Baskin goes 4-1-5 on Hades in Game 1, and then 5-1-7 on Camazotz there in Game 3. 2-4-12, so high assists, lower kills on the tier in Game 2, but every player is going to have those games. Charlie, I think Baskin's looking just fine here in this set against the Scarabs.
Yeah, if that's Rusty Baskin, if Baskin's on point, he just, like, 1v5s the whole league. Just anyone. He does not care.
Well, that's what we've been grown to expect, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's a reason that everyone says, like, if there was just 5 Baskins, the league would, nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, I suppose. Well, look, Baskin, self-proclaimed some growing still to do here as the solo laner. I mean, there is some truth in that, of course. Matchups to learn, individual player tendencies to learn. The meta has changed a lot over in the solo lane. But ultimately, the highlights of Game 3 here for the Olympus Bolts, some great moments. We were scrapping early in this one, Trelly, and Ven gets off to a fantastic start, a duo kill in the double lane. No, I said that backwards.
The double lane.
I did do that on purpose, I swear. Double kill in the duo lane for Ven to start off this game. And rusty or not, Baskin puts together a really nice game on this Camazotz. Felt so difficult to kill, as always, and really made that dive count.
Yeah, no doubt, and especially when Lasbro's opening up so much space. And he did sound very humble, saying, we were winning fights, so it made me look good. But he's always been the style of jungler that wants to come in after the fact, regardless. But even when they weren't winning fights, Lasbro was able to find those much-needed picks to keep the team alive in things like game number 2, for example.
Oh my God!
And Ben was just doing so much damage throughout once he got to that late game part of Yu Huang's kid, where you're just able to essentially 100-0 someone with a good connection from the Emerald Dragon, or the Jade Dragons rather. It just does so much damage on that character.
And I know we haven't talked much about it. I'll give my fantasy team a shout out. I have Laz and Ven.
I've got Baskin.
You have Baskin, so you and I are feeling okay about how these games went. Baskin, some really nice games. Lasbro and Ven, some great games as well. Haven't said Jake's name too much today, but I think Jake played that role exactly how his team needed to. The Cabrakan's so highly prioritized to go 0-3-12 here in Game 3. High assists in all 3 of the games. The Horus, there were some games or some moments maybe where it looked like potential overextensions, but Game 2 was all over the place. I think in a set where some of the other players on the Bolts really were the ones who stepped up, I think Jake did exactly what was needed.
Yeah, I think the Cabrakan, for me, the engage is just like, it's so par for the course. You expect double stun into wall, then the damage after the fact looks so clean. You're like, wow, that was so cool, but it was all there because Jake did his job.
Of course.
And that's just what we expect from him, right? We know whenever Jake spawns in, he's going to hit his abilities. He might go a little bit too far every once in a while, but he's going to get the job done.
Well, it's the age-old tale. It's the supports win you the games, the frontliners win you the games, but it's the carries who really put the butts in the seats. They sell the tickets. Their names are in the paper. It's exactly how it goes in this one. Jake is winning the game, but it's Ven, and it's Lasbra, and it's Barracuda sometimes that we're talking about at the end of this one. The Olympus Bolts get their first win of the phase, and we've got one more game in Week 1 of Phase 3 of the SPL. And Trelly, it's a good one. Jade Dragons and Camelot Kings going toe-to-toe with one another. 2 teams that looked amazing in their first sets of the phase. Jade Dragons 2-0 over the Solar Scarabs. Camelot Kings 2-0 over the Valhalla Valkyries. And remember, it was the Jade Dragons in that Game 2 against the Scarabs. Got a little interesting. And then Game 2 of the Kings and the Valkyrie set was very, very closely matched. The Valkyries bounced back quite well. And so a rematch to end this week of the SMITE Summer Masters Finals. That set went 5. And the Dragons and the Kings, I think as of now, 2 teams that most fans would have 1 and 2 in the league.
Yeah, no doubt. I think this is going to be this is going to tell me a lot about the compositions that both of these teams like to play. Because for example, the role swapping between Pagon and Scream, the Atlas, was that something that was just they felt confident in their matchup, or I mean, if they're going to pull that out against the Camelot Kings, that'll tell me this is something they've actually practiced on. This is something they feel confident on. They would actually do in real competitive play. These are the kind of things I'm looking for. I want to know, what have they been cooking up in the back, because they're still undefeated since grabbing Scream. They've dropped individual games but not sets. So is this just an overwhelming confidence thing that they can't lose to anyone, or is the Camelot King going to bring them to something that we can actually see how they're going to play?
It's such an interesting thought experiment where you start to talk about, okay, World's right around the corner. If you're the Jade Dragons, do you want to go this is almost I mean, ridiculously unlikely to happen. But do you want to go all the way to Worlds without any serious road bumps, undefeated even? Again, super unlikely to happen. But you want to face some turmoil here as the Jade Dragon, see how you bounce back at some point. Could the Camelot Kings give it to them to end this week in the SPL? Jade Dragons, Camelot Kings, a rematch of SMITE Summer Masters Finals coming up next.